Hello, my friends, and welcome to another very special episode of Live with Lava Sub. We are coming to you live from Lava Sub at Nerdcrafty. This episode is special for two major reasons. First of all, it's Sam's fucking birthday week. God damn it! Our illustrious, incredible producer, Semantics, has had their birthday this week, and I tend to go by birthday months. If it's my birthday month, I get special treatment that whole month, and if you don't, I'm gonna pee in your cereal. So I extend that to my friends like Samantha, and I'm just happy that we could be here and celebrate Sam on this wonderful day, this wonderful month. This wonderful birthday month. And September is, God, it's one of those months where it just feels like so many of my friends have birthdays and family members have birthdays in September that it's almost like, I don't know if this is just my perspective, because I don't know a lot of people with birthdays in January. So, I don't know, tell me if this sounds crazy, Sam. Does it feel like you never really get to have that birthday experience? Like, it doesn't feel special because everyone's got a birthday in September? Oh no. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about Burning Man. But that's one more reason that I'm mad at Burning Man. Is it makes Sam feel less special. Sam is better than Burning Man. I don't know how to tell you this. Yeah, way, way better than Burning Man. I mean, the mud is the least of my worries. It's usually the aftermath of Burning Man, the disruption of the natural ecosystems there, the micro ecosystems there. I read a testimonial from indigenous person that whose ancestral land is where they hold Burning Man, and talked about how insulting it is for white people to be constantly inviting them to their ancestral fucking land to join some party that isn't in any way about their people, their culture, or even most of the time doesn't even acknowledge that it is what it is. And that makes me angry as well. There's years, it's been going on for so long, there's been plenty of time to do research on how it disrupts the environment there. And I think that's one of the things I hate about it also. But yeah, I've heard a lot. We don't have to get into Burning Man. I don't even like Burning Man. I don't want to talk about Burning Man. Burning Man sucks. It's Sam's birthday month. Sam, it's now your birthday month. Burning Man canceled forever. There's absolutely. Burning Man is a shitty party compared to Samantha. For me, I just like my mom's is the third. One of my good friends, one of my surrogate parents, effectively, his birthday is the day after my mom's. My brother's got a birthday in September. Half of my best old friends have birthdays in the middle of September. I don't know if this is a astrology thing or what, but that's just the facts. During September, I'm almost exhausted by how many times I go, oh, I wake up and it's this person's birthday. Oh my god, I feel like an asshole. I forgot it was their birthday. Because there are so many fucking birthdays in this month that I can't keep track of them all. It's impossible. I have a small brain, not a lot fit in here. So it's almost like, my point is that Anton LaVey, one of the people who I often talk shit about here, as well as speak praise on some of their work here. I was very influenced by LaVey's Satanism back in my mid-20s, I would say. I really liked a lot of what he had to say, especially a lot of the very um, I don't know. We could definitely go back and forth on this for a long time. I'm more than willing to do that. I think a lot of those conversations are very productive. But ultimately, Satanists now are very, very cringe. Satanists then, also very cringe. Satanism has always been very cringe. But there are a lot of things that I do appreciate about it. And one of those things is celebration of birthdays is the highest satanic holiday. The individual celebrates their birthday in a way that's as hedonistic, as pleasure-filled, as at a level of importance that people tend to celebrate and talk about Halloween and Christmas and things like that. You know how people get absolutely nuts. I recently realized I like Christmas adults less than I like Disney adults. Like Christmas adults are way more cringy than Satanists ever could be. There's no possible way to match their level of cringe. It is superpower level cringe. It is it is Super Saiyan God level cringe. Christmas music sucks. I don't care if Mariah Carey and Whitney Houston are some of the greatest singers that have ever existed on the face of this fucking planet, and they do Christmas songs. They did 2 Christmas songs that people listen to every fucking year. You know what? I fucking hate every Christmas song. They all suck, except for the Run DMC song, and that's only because it doesn't get as much play, and I'm not fucking sick of it.
Is that Christmas in Hollis?
Christmas in Hollis, yes. I love Run DMC, unironically. They are some of the godfathers of hip hop. They matter more to me than most other artists. Just generally, I think the aesthetic, the music, the inspiration behind it, it's all really beautiful, and I adore it.
I really like
people...
Oh, sorry, I just want to interrupt.
Oh.
If I don't get this thought out, it's not going to come out. The Beatles Christmas song, Simply Having a Wonderful Christmas Time, but I only like it because I started reading it as these people having a pagan ritual, and then some Christian bursts in, so they have to kind of mask everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen a bunch of memes that kind of deal with a very similar subject matter of simply having a wonderful Christmas time being this pagan ritual constantly. Sorry, are you on mic?
Yeah, I'm on mic. I put myself on mic.
Oh, okay. Then I don't need to explain what you just said. I've seen memes that have that kind of framing, and I'm like, I really enjoy them. And I like it because if true, if intended, which I doubt it is, but it does have that feeling of the pagans are typically. I think. Oh my God, what is his name? There's a TikTok historian and religious. What's the word? Like a religious studies major type of dude. I can't remember his titles. He's actually very smart and credentialed and shit. Does a lot of really great research. Actual literal research, not just studying on the internet things in the field, where he takes on a lot of the typical myths and misinterpretations of not just the Bible, but a lot of biblical culture and things like that. So he's talked about how certain holidays are appropriations of previous pagan holidays.
Oh, yeah.
And I know he did one on that kind of debunks the typical the misconception that Easter is a pagan holiday retrofitted to Christianity, which is actually not true, which I thought was true for a really long time. But he did a really great video explaining and kind of breaking all of those pieces down and explaining that it is actually not true, which kind of a bummer. I love that shit.
Yeah, it makes you wonder where they got the word Easter from.
Yeah, I definitely would defer to, God, I should remember, it's like Mark Elland, Mac Elland, something like that. Anyway, I'll get it to Sam. It'll be in the VOD when you get to it on YouTube. I'll make sure that I get you that link, Sam.
Okay.
He's actually great. You should follow him. Everyone should. He's really wonderful. He does great work. I'm just an asshole and can't remember anything. Little brain. Can't fit a line here. I told you this already. Second part of why this is very special. My intro is great today. Just absolutely spot on, dead on, perfect. The second reason this is an important and very special presentation from Live at Lava Sub is we're doing things a little different today. We're celebrating not just Sam's birthday, but we're also celebrating pulp and genre fiction. One of my true obsessions in life. I have been immersed in this world since the first time a teacher in, I believe, first grade, could have been third grade. I had the same teacher in first and third grade, and it was definitely this lady, I don't know, Mrs. Burke. I don't think anyone could find her based on that. She was really lovely, and she read us in first or third grade, The Hobbit, a beautiful illustrated version of it. We watched the movie afterwards. It was one of those moments in my life where I was like, do I want to read and write books? I like books now. But turns out it was just genre fiction and Pulp Fiction, kind of specifically. Not the movie, although I do like that movie, even though it has some weird shit in it at this point. It's hard to... Tarantino's got baggage, that's all. A lot of baggage with that man. But, you know, can't argue. Great filmmaker. One of the best, honestly, of our era. And Pulp Fiction fucking rips. Let's just be real. But no, we're not talking about the Quentin Tarantino. We're talking about Pulp Fiction as in the kind of fiction that he took the name from. When at the beginning of the movie, where it shows you the dictionary definition of pulp, where it's like muddy paper that's been all immersed in water and broken down to its pulp, or also like a type of fiction that's gritty or whatever it says in the dictionary definition at the time. But ultimately, Pulp Fiction and genre fiction are more or less the same thing. Pulp is just kind of the derogatory name for it that people who read Piers Anthony like to use. I'm sorry, I just used Piers Anthony. I don't know anything about the man, other than the fact that his name sounds like really fancy. So people who read like fancy ass Asimov or other, like, obviously fucking pulp ass writers, but people refer to them as genre writers or genre fiction writers because it sounds less derogatory than pulp. But I lean into the derogatory, baby. That's what I do. I'm a punk. I like pulpy shit. I like nasty shit. And there is not much more nasty shit than really weird social commentary coming from a fantasy or sci-fi perspective. And there's horror and adventure, things like that are also typified, or typically put into the pulp genre as well. But yeah, ultimately, it's all just genre fiction. Stuff that's basically anything not a drama. Basically, I mean, I was kind of joking, but that is basically a great way to put it. Honestly, I don't even know if I'm going to draw today. I haven't, like, really set up for physical mediums. I could probably take, like, a quick 5 at some point and switch it over to digital, maybe, but I hadn't planned on drawing anything today. I have a stack of books.
Oh, nice.
If you don't know this, I am actor. I told you, I'm very stupid. And that should have told you everything you needed to know about me, including I'm an actor. I act, though. And
Silly us, we thought the world would want culture.
yeah, silly me, silly us. Who wants art? Nobody. But bad career without a backup. Wouldn't recommend. But really fulfilling and enjoyable if you don't try and make it a career. Honestly, it's still pretty cool. Still pretty enjoyable and fun if you do, but you're also poor forever. You have to kind of recognize that will happen. That you'll be poor forever. 99% of people who want to be artists as a career are going to be poor forever. And then 1% gets lucky or has like a rich parent or something, and everything works out for them. And then we think of that as the norm, and it's fucking not. Most of us are poor. Jesus. A lot of. I was going to make a flippant remark, but the reality of it is I live in Los Angeles, and a not small portion of the people who I see out on the street living rough are doing so because they're more like me than the people who work in the buildings around us. They were in a no small proportion of them artists who thought they would move to LA and be successful, and unfortunately were wrong. Didn't have the finances that would be able to support them here, didn't have the ability to work a day job because of any number of social or health reasons. And to give this a little bit more of a concrete rather than just me spouting off, my cousin was one of the first people I knew who moved down here. My cousin is a writer, and for his first 2 years here, he was going to school down here to be a writer. Actually, really fantastic writer. Gerard, if you're watching, love you, bud. He does a real job now, and does not live in LA. But when he first moved here, I remember him telling me one of his first jobs down here was as a teacher for a homeless shelter, where he would go to a shelter and he would teach creative writing to a bunch of people who were living at the shelter at the time. And from his experience, most of those people are exactly as I'm describing. People who came down here because they thought they had the potential, they had the ability to be a successful artist, and because of any number of social or economic or other factors, were not able to fulfill their dreams, to work, to literally just work in the field that they studied in, that they are expert in, that they have mastered through years of practice and study and just genuine hard work. Art is labor. Every artist is a laborer. Some of us get paid a lot of money, and that kind of sours the idea for a lot of people who view art as not a working class pursuit. But they're wrong. They're just dead wrong. Most artists are working class by economic status and by the fact that they are genuinely laborers. Just because you don't have respect for that labor doesn't mean it's not labor. Fuck you if you think I'm wrong. I'm not going to argue with you. You're a baby. I am stupid, but you are dumber. So there's that. In fact, actually, that brings me right around to the point we're here, because a lot of these authors that I am pulling from today were poor throughout most of their lifetime, and that was during an era where it was economically more feasible to be a working artist. Bob Howard, the writer of Conan the Barbarian, Kroll the Conqueror, Solomon Kane, and many other stories that would typify not just Pulp Fiction, But genre fiction genuinely into the future leading to this very moment, to now. People are drawing inspiration from his characters. Killed himself in his car at age 30. He was poor for most of, if not all of his life. He was barely successful as a writer in the last few years of that life, that hard life, living in Texas during the Depression, moving around often as his father was a physician, a traveling physician. His mother was ill for most of his life. And when he was 30 years old, he got a call that said that his mother's condition had worsened and that it would be fatal. And he went to his car and he shot himself in the head. Bob Howard lived in a complicated era. And I gotta tell you, from my perspective, it has gotten no less complicated. It has only gotten more complicated for artists. Sorry, I should be doing trigger warnings at the beginning of every episode like I always say I'm going to. That was tough. I'm sorry if that was triggering for anyone. But yeah, from here on, just know that rough shit's going to be talked about. And in fact, most of these books are going to have incredible violence and, God, some of them very odd, sometimes racist depictions of other human beings.
Oh, they are not kind to Asian people usually.
No, in fact, actually, one of these books that I'm reading from is San Francisco Noir. I think the second or third story in this, I think it was the second, yeah. Frank Norris is the Third Circle, which also was written in 1897, so it is public domain. We could read that today. But I read through the first couple pages of it, and I was like, oh, this is racist. This entire thing is about how evil Chinese immigrants in San Francisco are. I get it. Okay, no thank you.
Yeah, so evil for building the railroads.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So evil for not even being seen as people for decades and decades through the beginnings of the Old West. Yeah, fucking insane. So we're going to be reading Ambrose Bierce from that San Francisco Noir book, a story called A Watcher by the Dead. Ambrose Bierce was, I'm actually not super familiar with his work, but I kind of I went through a long period where I was buying like old used books through there was a used bookstore called Treehorn in downtown Santa Rosa, not too far from where I used to live, and I used to go there fairly regularly, mostly to pick up like old Conan the Barbarian books, Theodore Sturgeon, like sci-fi and fantasy writers that were in a lot of cases just out of print at this point, but I could go to Treehorn and find some of their old work. Also, I mean, if you're in Sonoma County, go to Treehorn. I don't know if anybody doesn't know and lives in Sonoma County, but if you don't know, they have comics, they have art books, most of it fairly excessively priced, fairly inexpensive. I mean, half of the Conan stuff I picked up, I think this says $250 on the cover. Yeah. Yeah, $250. Actually, it's backwards for you. I don't know why I was trying to show you. Anyway, $2.50 for that book. It's got 4 stories. The fucking type is itty bitty, so it fits a lot of material in each page. These were, and that's exactly what the point of these was when they first started being put out. Actually, not this specifically. These were printed in the 60s. I'll probably get into more Conan shit later once I start reading it. But ultimately, the history of Pulp starts with serialized like publications that would put out a bunch of different authors' work in a serialized fashion, week to week, sort of like we do with comic books, sort of like they were doing with comic books at the time. But So you get like a collection of stories from a bunch of different authors, most of which were short stories anyway. So serializing them meant you get a little bit more stretch out of the material. God, most of these authors weren't getting paid much and weren't getting paid like per publication of the work. They published it once with a publisher, usually like, there was Weird Tales was one of the big ones. There was so many we could get into. But that tradition lasted for a very long time, I think until probably the 70s or 80s. And kind of has fallen out. We get like big collections. Like I have a couple, like I think I have H.P. Lovecraft collection of a bunch of his old stories, but that was like not a cheap book. I had to pay like probably $25 for this like book with like 30 of H.P. Lovecraft stories in it. Don't recommend it. We could talk about how H.P. Lovecraft's prose is actually quite lovely. The way that he strings words together is complex and has a understanding of the English language that not many of his contemporaries in Pulp really utilized. We could talk about, but yeah, he was a very weird and bad man, is the thing. Bad is oversimplifying, but we don't have H.P. Lovecraft here today. I've read a number of his stories. I think he's fine. I think, strangely, Bob Howard has much better prose and is much more of a punchy writer. And curiously, okay, I don't know if this is true. I want to just get that out front. And this is my theory. This is my problematic ship. Is that I am of the belief that Bob Howard and H.P. Lovecraft were fucking. That's just me. No one else has to believe me. I'm going to write an Oscar-winning movie based around this concept.
I was just gonna say, I will watch that movie.
So
it better not be queer baiting, though.
No, I'm pretty sure that they were not, because they're both weird dudes. But I will say, both died young. H.P. Lovecraft was a little bit older. They're the perfect bear and twink combo. We've got the Texan bear that's into weightlifting at a time where weightlifting basically meant I fuck dudes. Like Bob Howard in the 20s, I believe, it would have been, was getting into, no, it would have been the teens, the 19 teens. Was when Bob Howard started getting into weightlifting, and if you know enough about gay culture, you know that gyms are very gay. Even at this point where hypermasculine dudes are constantly going to the gym and talking about gym culture and really poisoning the well with their awful takes and bad manners. I just remember there's been no shortage of comedians who have talked about this exact predicament, is that gyms and bodybuilding is very gay. And that is with a modern perspective, okay? Take yourself back 100 years, fuckface. Think about a bunch of men in the teens and 20s collecting together to look at each other's bodies in a gym where they're all lifting weights. This is so.
Literally
in
to
fact,
objectify each other.
Yeah, to objectify each other, absolutely. And if you look back into, if you've studied queer history, you know, for a documented fact that in this era, gyms were a notorious cruising place and would remain so for a very, very long time. I mean, to this day, one would argue, I would argue, that yeah, gyms were known to be places to cruise, especially when being in the closet was even more of a safety concern than it is today. Especially being able to defend oneself and being able to pass as very masculine and very straight by having a giant body was something a lot of gay men in that era were doing. Very smart because for the most part we're men are pretty smart. So Bob Howard. Bob Howard was a weightlifter and mountain climber and boxer in this era. Absolute bear material. Meanwhile, H.P. Lovecraft was this slightly effeminate East Coast, Northeast Coast benefiter of familial wealth who was notoriously just constantly like not wanting to go outside, afraid of people, afraid of the world around him, which honestly makes sense when you read his work. So we have the perfect kind of twink bear combo here. I'm just saying. Even just looking at the aesthetics of them as straight men, we would still make those kind of jokes regardless. But what further makes me has given me this theory is that the two were notorious pen pals. Before Bob Howard has really made his break, really before H.P. Lovecraft was, I mean, H.P. Lovecraft was never that successful in his time. He ruined his family fortune, went into poverty. I think after that, I think he said he was a socialist for a while, but I don't really believe that. But yeah, I mean, poverty does give you a certain perspective on capitalism, doesn't it? But yeah, for some people, I don't know. Very interesting. So these two were pen pals before either of them had successful writing. How did they meet? Couldn't have been cruising. But also, they both kind of started getting more work around the same time, and as pen pals, began working out each other's mythology together. H.P. Lovecraft and Bob Howard have a shared universe, a baby that they made together called Eldritch Horrors and Ancient Gods. This is very old research and probably not true, but if I'm not mistaken, both contributed to the Necronomicon when that was published. Which also makes sense if you read the Necronomicon. But they did absolutely have a shared universe, shared characters, not necessarily... because if you look at Conan and Kroll and Solomon Kane, all of Bob Howard's work, it did take place in a fictionalized version of our world. He talked about not wanting to have to be restrained by actual historical events, and wanted to write more fantastical versions of the world that we lived in a prehistoric time. So that's Hyperborea. And what comes of that eventually is a collision with our world, which H.P. Lovecraft more or less writes from the perspective of the world that he was living in at the time. But if you... ultimately, he never references historical events or anything like that, so very well could be just a completely shared universe that has no kind of like untangling to have done. So these two very straight men definitely weren't having sex or writing love letters to each other. Definitely didn't happen. But No, so that's my problematic shit. And I'm not saying bad because gay. I'm saying good because gay would be cooler if gay. But yeah, because being in the closet was a safety precaution, and a lot of men in that period would never come out and say they were gay. Yeah, a not insignificant amount of people share this belief and talk about it on forums together. You know, to the chagrin of a lot of the more problematic losers that read Conan the Barbarian because of what should be obvious reasons if you've ever read any of either of their works. They were racist, is the thing. And I would say that Bob Howard, of the two, actually had experience with people that weren't exclusively white. Bob Howard lived in the South in the early 19th century, and because of his father's profession, was always having to find new jobs, particularly in rural areas, particularly where he would work with people of color on a regular basis and know them to be and become friends with them. This is not necessarily to take away of the historical racism that he tends to participate in a lot of his work, but does give you different context than, a racist like H.P. Lovecraft, who was, like I said earlier, just afraid of everything around him, and yeah, because he didn't understand it and he never tried. You know what I mean? It's like, oh man, it's a common thing we hear about in like early rock and roll as well. You know, this like similar stories from Johnny Cash or like what is it, Chet Atkins, I think has talked about this a lot. But yeah, anyway, I think even as Elvis has some story that people have said that's not true about him working also in similar situations, but I don't want to talk about any of that. Point is that yes, a lot of these authors, lived most of their lives with never seeing like a genuine kind of success that a lot of authors from like closer to the 60s would see in their lifetimes. Like I was saying, Asimov, absolutely a pulp writer. Started off in exactly the same ways as these dudes. But because of the time he was living in, had a lot more ability to make a living doing it. Same with like, in a way, even Tolkien, who had written a lot of those stories much earlier, had gotten through a lot of the like languages and all the complicated world building that he did long before he ever published The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings or anything else. So yeah, it's and I think around this period is where we start seeing highfalutin terms for pulp authors, but I think we never needed that. Actually, and that tradition goes back even further. We're talking about further than the 1890s, because Robert Louis Stevenson, absolutely also a pulp author. Many people would fight me on this one, but those people go to school and would lose. I didn't do good in school, and I would win. Is the thing. But I have a copy of Treasure Island here, and Treasure Island is a beloved work of fiction regardless of where it came from. But it's not like this book was written for... this book was written as a pop novel. In fact, most fiction that we still remember today from periods past was usually a kind of pulp type of fiction, a popular fiction of its time. I think Dickens is another great example of this, where like people think about Dickens like he's one of the great writers of his period and Western influence of culture and all that. But I mean, my guy was essentially doing the same thing as Bob Howard, putting out serialized pieces that eventually were collected into novels. It was pop fiction, It was pulp. So that's why I celebrate it, because there's no reason not to. The only reason that people don't celebrate it is the same reason that people don't celebrate a lot of outsider or cheap art, is that because of its price tag, because of its popular consumption, people think less of it. And those people suck. They're boring. They have bad taste, and are cringe. So, get with it, sweetie. So, that's my rant. I think I want to get into it. And I've been talking a lot about Bob Howard. And I've got a lot of books here that I want to read. But let me start by giving some context here. So, not that I haven't given any context on Bob Howard's work, but recently I started thinking. I hadn't been in this headspace for a while. I've been doing a lot of other stuff and not thinking about, like, basically what are my roots. Fantasy, sci-fi, goofy ass shit, magical shit. I like that. Give me to it. Give it to me. Give me to it. And once I got back from my trip in Sonoma County, I had been reading Treasure Island, right? And I kind of started having a lot of these thoughts, like, man, what's interesting? We'll get into the Treasure Island stuff later, but I started having these thoughts about, this is just genre fiction, this is just pulp, kind of around then. And when I got back, I was talking to my roommate about it. We were talking about different public domain works that haven't really been adapted very often or very well, and would like to see what we would like to see kind of done with these old works of fiction that are really incredible but don't get the kind of shine that they deserve, because when they have been adapted, they've been adapted in ways that are I guess inappropriately campy. It's good to be campy in these kind of situations. I would be frustrated if it wasn't campy. But the Conan movie, the one with Schwarzenegger, that's the best Conan we have. I like the Jason Momoa one, sorta. Mostly because Jason Momoa spends most of the screen time in a loincloth and nothing else, swinging a big sword, which is a thing I like, in many ways. But it's not a great adaptation of the work. It does a few things that I would do if I were trying to adapt Conan, but it doesn't pull it off well. It feels very far spread, and it ends up kind of reading a little bit flat as far as an adaptation of the work. And I think a lot of that is because Howard's prose is fascinating. One of the coolest writers, literally the coolest writer of his time, one of these people who could take who took no time. Wanted you to know the information, was not doing a 16-page build-up to a climactic moment. He was brutally dragging you through these climaxes, these fights, these encounters, that feels like it has it, the author comes from a place where he understands violence inherently. Coming from a place that knows the terrible nature of it, but coming from a place that also understands there is beauty in that kind of movement, in that kind of raw human emotion and physicality, and he puts it all out there. Also very gay. I'm just being an asshole now. So I started rereading the Conan stories, and I have so many of these fucking books. I have at least 9 of the Sprague de Camp, Lynn Carter etc. Edits on these stories, as well as adding their own stories to it, which cringe. Why the fuck would you do that? Stop. Ew. Gross. But also other different collections that pulled directly from the weird tales that they were originally published in, and all those other publications they were originally published in. Take the transcripts directly from that, so there's less of a editorial bias that tends to come out sometimes. That you'll see in these books, the Carter DeCamp, DeCamp books. So I was going through these old books. I have so many of them, and I know that I knew going into this, but Bob Howard didn't release these in any kind of chronological order or anything like that. There is no, to my understanding at that moment, there was no canon, Bob Howard canon of Conan the Barbarian. He didn't fucking care about that shit. He just wanted to write these weird little stories with his sweet little guys. And he did. He did a really cool job. And just wrote completely non-linearly, completely out of chronology, doing whatever the fuck he wanted with this character, putting him in different timelines, putting him in different situations, and just seeing what would happen. Until I did a little digging, because I wanted to... I wanted to know more about how the character evolved, where it comes from. I wanted to know more, so I started just doing a little bit of study on it, and eventually ended up at a wiki page that kind of was just going through when Bob Howard published each story, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And right after that was here's the chronology as per X, Y, and Z, fiction students, students who study creative writing and things like that, and scholars and things like that. So there's a lot of them, and in fact, one of them that Bob Howard was even alive to see in his time. Two people whose names I don't remember, they don't matter. Had a chronology for the Conan stories that I think was published, which then, they sent to Bob Howard, who then kind of wrote them back. Was like, yeah, it's fine, why not? He wasn't super enthusiastic. He appreciated it. He thought it was really sweet. Ultimately he was he wasn't saying, this is it, you are the ones, you nailed it. He was just yeah, that's fine, I don't care. But that started a fucking nerd war, basically, that's been going on to basically this day, where, oddly enough, Piers Anthony was one of the people who has a chronology for the Conan stories that breaks from the original. And since the original's kind of inception, there have been a number of people who adjusted and made changes to the chronology of the stories, even what they're including in the chronology of events. Oddly, most of the historians, scholars of the work who make these chronologies up include all of the other versions of Conan not written by Bob Howard. And that's what I found really alarming. I was like, well, they suck though. No Conan book or story that I've ever read written by anybody that wasn't named Bob Howard is ass. It's garbo. And it tries to be Bob Howard and can't. It just genuinely the authors can't. Very singular kind of voice, this one. And they have their own, and they shouldn't try and mimic another person's, because it ends up being fucking stupid. And unreadable for me. I can't try and read Lynn Carter or Sprague de Camp, try and buffoon their way through a Conan story. They're not good. And half of the time, they're taking old little pieces of stories that Bob Howard was writing for other characters, unfinished stories and things like that, and tries to finish them, or put Conan into the main character seat and just rewrite it like Conan's there. And that's cringe. That's fucking weird. I don't know why they were allowed to do that. I want to fight them I want to fight them. They're just bad people. You shouldn't do that. I don't know why I'm so upset about it, but it really upsets me. Thinking about like a dead man who died when he was 30 years old. Obviously a very sensitive dude. And someone who cared very much about these characters, put everything he had into one of the most prolific authors. My God, just wrote all the fucking time. By the time he was like a little kid. So yeah, I think it's weird that people just like feel entitled to change shit like that. Like it's gross. I don't like it. So I don't read any of the Carter de Camp stories because they're weird, and I definitely wouldn't include them in a chronology of the stories because I'm not going to read that fucking garbage. So the last one on this list was a scholar whose name I also don't remember because little brain, nothing in here. Only fit art. But yeah, there's another scholar who came up with a chronology including only Bob Howard stories, excluding every other author that tried to write Conan stories, and focused only on the chronology of Conan as Bob Howard wrote him, which I like. And I then took like an hour or so, basically just numbering all of and labeling and tabbing all of my Conan books so that I could read them in that order. That order actually used for the Dark Horse series that they did about Conan right before the license. I think reverted back to Marvel at this point. I don't really remember, but none of that shit matters because the original Bob Howard stories are public domain. I could read them for you today. And that's the preamble. That's what I was going to do. That was the whole thing. I think we got through it. I did a great job. Tell me I did a great job, please. Okay. Thank you, Sam. So I will be reading a little bit of Conan. This is from The Hand of Nurgle. Chapter 1. Black Shadows. Crom! The oath was torn from the young warrior's grim-set lips. He threw back his head, sending his tousled shock of black hair flying, and lifted his smoldering blue eyes skyward. They widened in sheer astonishment. An eerie thrill of superstitious awe ran through his tall, powerfully built body, which was burnt brown by the fierce wasteland suns. Broad-shouldered and deep-chested, lean of waist, long of leg, and naked, save for a rag of cloth about his loins and high-strapped sandals. He had entered the battle mounted, as one of a troop of irregular cavalry, but his horse, given to him by the nobleman Marullo in Corinthia, had fallen to the foeman's arrows at the first onset, and the youth had fought on foot. His shield had been smashed by the enemy's blows. He had cast it aside and battled with sword alone. Above, from the sunset smoldering sky of this bleak, windswept Turanian steppe, where two great armies were locked in a fury of desperate battle, came horror. The field was drenched in sunset fires and bathed in human blood. Here the mighty host of Yildiz, king of Turan, in whose army the youth served as a mercenary, had fought for 5 long hours against the iron-shod legions of Monthesian Khan, rebellious Sitrat of the Zamorian marshes of northern Tehran. Now, circling slowly downwards from the crimson sky, came nameless things, whose like the barbarian had never seen or heard before in all his travels. They were black, shadowy monsters, hovering on broad, arc-ribbed wings like enormous bats. The two armies fought on, unseeing. Only Conan, here on this low hill, ringed about with the bodies of men his sword had slain, saw them descending through the sunset sky. Leaning on his dripping blade and resting his sinewy arms for a moment, he stared at the weird shadow things, for they seemed to be more shadow than substance, translucent to the sky sight, like wisps of noisome black vapor, were the shadowy ghosts of gigantic vampire bats. Evil, slitted green eyes of flame glared through their smoky forms. And even as he watched, napiers prickling with a barbarian's dread of the supernatural, they fell upon the battle like vultures on a field of blood, fell and slew. Screams of pain and fear rose from the host of King Yildiz as the black shadows hurtled amongst their ranks. Whenever the shadows swooped, they left a bloody corpse. By the hundred they came, and the weary ranks of the Turanian army fell back, stumbling, tossing away their weapons in a panic. "Fight! You dogs! Stand and fight!" Thundering angry commands in a stern voice, a tall, commanding figure on a great black mare sought to hold the crumbling line. Conan glimpsed the sparkles of a silver-gilt chainmail under a rich blue cloak, and a hawk-nosed, black-bearded face, kingly and harsh under a spired steel helm that caught the crimson sun like polished mirror. He knew the man for King Yildiz's general, Bakra of Akif. With a ringing oath, the proud commander drew his tulwar and laid about him with the flat of the blade. Perhaps he could have rallied the ranks, but one of the devil shadows swooped on him from behind. It folded vaporous, filming wings about him in a grisly embrace, and he stiffened. Conan could see his face, suddenly pale and staring, frozen, eyes of fear, and he saw the features through the enveloping wings, like a white mask behind a veil of thin black lace. The general's horse went mad and bolted in terror. But the phantom thing plucked the general from his saddle. For a moment, it bore him midair on a slowly beating wing, then let him fall, a torn, bloody thing in dripping rags. The face, which had stared at Conan through shadowy wings with eyes of blazing terror, was a red ruin. Thus ended the career of Bakra of Akif, and thus ended his battle as well. With his commander gone, the army went mad. Conan saw seasoned veterans with a score of campaigns under the belts run shrieking from the field like raw recruits. He saw proud nobles screaming like craven serfs, and behind them, untouched by the flying phantoms, grinning with victory, the hosts of the rebel Sitrat pressed their weirdly won advantage. The day was lost, unless one strong man should stand firm and rally the broken host by his example. Before the foremost of the fleeting soldiers rose suddenly a figure so grim, so savage, that it checked their headlong, panic-stricken flight. "Stand, you fatherless curs, or by Crom, I'll fill your craven bellies with a foot of steel." It was the Cimmerian mercenary, his dark face like a grim mask of stone, cold as death. Fierce eyes under black scowling brows blazed with volcanic rage. Naked, splattered from head to heels with reeking gore, he held a mighty long sword in one great scarred fist. His voice like the deepened growl of thunder. Have you set any value on your sniveling lives, you white-livered dogs? Bah! Or I'll split your cowardly guts at your feet. Lift that scimitar against me, you Hycurian pig, and I'll tear out your heart with my bare hands and make you eat it before you die. What? Are you women, to fly from shadows? But a moment ago you were men, aye, fighting men of Turin. You stood against foes armed with naked steel and fought them face to face. Now you turn and run like children from night shadows? Bah! Makes me proud to be a barbarian, to see you city-bred weaklings cringe before a flight of bats! For a moment, he held them. For a moment only. A black-winged nightmare swooped upon him, and even he, stepped back from its grim, shadowy wings and the stench of its fetid breath. The soldiers fled, leaving Conan to fight the thing alone. And fight he did. Setting his feet squarely, he swung the great sword, pivoting on slim hips, with the full strength of back, shoulders, and mighty arms behind the blow. The sword flashed in a whistling whirl of steel, cleaving the phantom in two. But it was, as he had guessed, a thing without substance, for his sword encountered no more resistance than the empty air. The force of the blow swung him off balance, and he fell sprawling on the stony plain. Above him the shadowy thing hovered. His sword had torn a great rent through it, as a man's hand breaks a thread of rising smoke. But even as he watched the vapory body reform, eyes like sparks of green hellfire blazed down at him, alive with a horrible mirth and an inhuman hunger. "Krog!" Conan gasped. It may have been a curse, but it sounded almost like a prayer. He sought to lift the sword again, but it fell from his nerveless hands. The instant the sword had slashed through the black shadow, it had gone cold, with an aching, stony, bone-deep chill like the interstellar gulfs that yawn blackly from the farthest stars. The shadow bat hovered on slowly beating wings, as if gloating over its fallen victim, or savoring his superstitious fear. With strengthless hands, Conan fumbled at his waist, where a strip of rawhide bound his loincloth to his middle. There, a thin dagger hung beside a pouch. His fumbling fingers found the pouch, not the dagger hilt, and touched something smooth and warm within the leathern bag. Suddenly, Conan jerked his hand away as a tingling electric warmth tore through his nerves. His fingers had brushed against that curious amulet he had found yesterday, when they encamped at Bahri. And in touching the smooth stone, strange force had been released. The bat thing veered suddenly away from him. A moment before, it had hovered so close that his flesh had crawled beneath the unearthly chill that seemed to radiate from its ghostly form. Now, it tore madly away from him, wings beating in frenzy. Conan dragged himself to his knees, fighting the weakness that pervaded his limbs. First, the ghastly cold of the shadow touch, then tingling warmth that had seethed through his naked body. Between these conflicting forces, he felt his strength draining away, his vision blurred, his mind wavered in the brink of darkness. Fiercely, he shook his head to clear his wits and gazed about him. "Mitra! Roman Mitra! Has the whole world gone mad?" Grisly host of flying terrors had driven the army of General Bakra from the field, or slain those that did not flee fast enough. But the grinning host of Muntasim Khan they had not touched, half ignored, almost as if the soldiers of Yarlet and the shadowy nightmare things had been partners in some unholy alliance of black sorcery. But now it was the warriors of Yarlet who fled screaming before the shadowy vampires. Both armies broke in and fled. Had the world indeed gone mad? Conan wildly west of the sunset sky. As for the Chimerian, strength and cautiousness drained from him suddenly. He fell forward into black oblivion. My man knows how to write. Sorry. Let's see. Oh, it's already noon. Okay. Okay. Debating whether or not I should continue with Conan. Let's see. There's like 20 more pages in this. I've already been through 8. I think we can continue with that and get through it with plenty of time to read more. But I also have 5 more books. So maybe we'll come back to it. So as I said, Bob Howard, I have nothing but shining things to say about his prose. That is not even one of the works that he completed during his lifetime. That is a incomplete work. Like, it tells the full story, but it had to be cribbed together through some edits, ultimately. Yeah, I don't think it was even, it was unpublished in his lifetime, and still, it is gripping the way that he describes things, describes the events taking place, the characters' motivations. That is one of the most difficult things to really to capture in an adaptation, because Conan isn't necessarily he is sometimes at times a very vocal character, but often in depictions of him we see him much more simply, much more reserved in what he says. But there are many times during the in many of the Conan stories where Conan becomes almost verbose and has a lot to say on things, giving us further perspective on who he is as a character. Even his rallying cry to these troops is, in a way, a further investigation of this character, his thoughts, his beliefs. And that is actually the perspective of the young version of Conan. This, in the chronology that I'm going by, is only the 6th Conan story. Conan is still maybe a teenager. Like, if I'm not mistaken, the first Conan story in this chronology takes place when Conan is just barely, by Chimerian standards, a man. He's like 13, 15. And only a couple of years have passed in the chronology of the character. Really, he's more than likely like 17, 18 years old. Where this is taking place. And already we see this character is capable of commanding an audience, commanding and inspiring in ways warriors and men who have seen maybe more battle than even he has at this point. Seasoned veterans, he says. So it's that is a compelling element of the character. we also see the perspective of a young man, someone who is going to try and motivate through being the bigger monster ultimately, by being tough, tough love, tough, harsh criticism, and things like that. Whereas a older version of that character is wiser, takes things a little bit more, with a little bit more nuance, is able to be just as effective, has learned that he's just as effective, if not more effective, being with tactics that don't demand he be the bigger monster. Which I think is fascinating, especially because these books or stories were written completely out of order, and still Bob Howard was able to, as a 20 to basically a dude in his 20s, writing these stories, was able to parse through the evolution of this character out of sequence, which, I mean, fuck, man, is a feat. I gotta be real with you. As someone who's tried to write quite a bit in their lifetime and kind of sucks at it, that's not easy. Obsessive levels of character development here going on, completely behind the scenes stuff we'll never read. Bob Howard probably had untold kind of journals and notebooks that talk all about like the way that he was trying to approach it, or maybe it was just going on in his head and he was giant fucking brained. I don't know, man. Either way, I've never not been impressed by reading Bob Howard. The guy really knew how to write. What his prose is snappy. It is brutal. It is beautiful, poetic even, but conveys a kind of physicality and the mindset that fits this character of Conan. One that is absolutely based on giving you the information without being overly verbose about it, without being overly explanational. He's not George R. R. Martin describing a cake for 35 pages, which I don't know if actually happens. It's just the thing I hear all the time about why reading George R. R. Martin can be frustrating, and also the reason I'm probably never going to pick up a George R. R. Martin book, because I really couldn't get through it. Tolkien is already like enough. Like that. It's my and that was my introduction into the genre. And if you're talking about a mountain more than J.R.R. Tolkien, you need to get the fuck out. You need to find another way to write, because I don't like it. I can't do it. It's not for me. That's all I know. If that's for you, no judgment. I'm not going to pick on you. I can't do it. Bores me to tears. Okay. We talk a lot about Orwell and Huxley. When we talk about dystopia. We talk about Brave New World and 1984 and To No End when we talk about great dystopian fiction. You know, it doesn't come up nearly enough. The Iron Boot. Heel. The Iron Heel. By Jack London, whose other books are much better known. But this is an interesting vision of dystopia, in that it almost fits the one we live in better than 1984 or Brave New World do. Okay, so full disclosure, I didn't do a lot of research on Jack London before this, but I know that the guy was a very interesting, kind of like a traveling type of author, always going from place to place and whatnot, spending a lot of time in like the West Coast all the way up past the border into Canada and whatnot. Always seemed like an interesting dude to me. There's like parks named after him that I've been to a bunch of times when I was a kid that my family would like to camp at. But yeah, I haven't really done a lot of research into who the guy was, but I know this book absolutely fucking rips. It's not. Now, I wouldn't say that his prose is as snappy as Bob Howard's. But what's really interesting about this book, that if I'm going to be honest, I've never finished, but what's really interesting about it is it has an introduction and a foreword that are told from the perspective of the characters in the book. They are like false introductions to the story. The whole thing is written kind of like a journal entry. And so there are all kinds of annotations within the story itself that are describing in greater detail some of the events that are casually mentioned in this journal, these journal entries. Which from neurodivergent, my neurodivergent perspective is intensely distracting and is a contributing factor to why I've never finished this book, because I'm always like going from sentence to annotation back to sentence, and that takes me so much longer to read the book that I know, like, some people won't even understand why that's hard for me, but some people are like, oh my god, I know, I fucking do the exact same thing because I keep losing my place and going back and reading again and trying to get the reading things 3 or 4 times so that you get the way that the author intended these moments to play as for me, audience, so that I get the proper vibe ultimately. So I understand how the story is supposed to be told. The annotations are supposed to be a distraction from the story, because that's what an annotation is. If you're reading like textbooks or whatever, annotation will take you out of whatever you're reading, so you can go and check the notes, study further on whatever thing that you're not clear about. But in a fiction, it's a distraction for me. So I'm not necessarily a fan of that, but I also like it. I don't like it from the perspective that it makes things harder for me to read, but I like it from the perspective that it makes the world feel more real. Does that make sense? Does that make me insane? I don't care, frankly. Point is, very interesting format for a novel, and from my perspective, definitely something that seems incredibly innovative for the time it was written. I don't know if it was a common trope, but yeah, it's not necessarily one that it is a stylistic choice that is a big decision to make, especially when you're writing fiction at the turn of the century. Very interesting dude. Definitely want to do more research on this guy, but time is hard. I'm looking for work. If you know anybody hiring in the Hollywood area, let me know. I gotta use the work. But also, if you want to buy some art, cast me in a movie. I don't know how to make money with music, so I'm not gonna even bring that up. But yeah, I'm semi-open for commissions. Basically, if I'm really busy, so you have to understand it's going to take me a while to get to it. If it's physical media, I'm just not doing it. I can't paint for anyone right now. I have too many paintings that I'm trying to finish on my own time while I'm doing everything else. I don't have time for physical mediums. I can do digital, and I'm mostly trying to focus on portraits, because that's what I can turn out pretty quickly. If you're looking for character portraits for your D&D characters, if you're looking for character designs for your game you're making, anything like that, I'm more than happy to help. As I need you to pay me something for it so that I'm not just doing this. Like, if I love you and I've told you that to your face, and getting we're real friends, then I will probably do it for a lot cheaper, or for free, maybe. Although I shouldn't. It's bad for me. I need to get money so that I can eat and pay rent and stuff like that. I know you know this. But yeah, if not, then yeah, you have to pay me. It's just not an option for you to get free work out of me. Yeah, good friends will figure something out, whether it's work trade or whatever, a bartering kind of thing. I'm more than happy to do that. Even honestly, if that's where I'm at. Pay me for stuff, buy magic cards, buy my comic books. You can check my Instagram. There's the story highlights you can go through and see what I have for sale. I have even more, so if you don't see what you're looking for there, just DM me. I have tons of Marvel, tons of independent publishers, not a lot of DC because DC's not my thing. It never really was. Although I do have some original first edition Watchmen comics. So if you are into DC, I have like at least 5, I think, of the original Watchmen run. Not the reboot or the sequel or any of that. I like the original Watchmen run. I have like single issue editions, so it's very collectible. I'm not doing anything with them. Buy them from me. I need money. How did I get here? Oh yeah, and also Patreon. Patreon and my Cash App. Not Cash App. I don't use that. Venmo. You can give us money there. Patreon helps the whole channel, and we appreciate you for it. My Venmo helps no one but me, but I am poor and don't have a job right now. So I think everyone's okay with me asking to go to my Venmo. That's why we have it in the chat. Yada yada yada. Jack London. I guess the question is, before I get started. No, it's not a question. I'm just going to tell you I'm not reading the annotations. It will distract all of us. If you're here and want me to read the annotations, I'm sorry. That's it. Chapter 1. My Eagle. The soft summer wind stirs the redwoods, and wild water ripples sweet cadences over its mossy stones. There are butterflies in the sunshine, and from everywhere arises the drowsy hum of bees. It is so quiet and peaceful, and I sit here and ponder, and am restless. It is the quiet that makes me restless. It seems unreal. All the world is quiet. But it is the quiet before the storm. I strain my ears and all my senses for some betrayal of that impending storm. Oh, that it may not be premature. That it may not be premature. A small wonder that I am restless, I think, and think, and I cannot cease from thinking. I have been in the thick of life so long that I am oppressed by the peace and quiet, and I cannot forbear from dwelling upon that mad maelstrom of death and destruction so soon to burst forth. In my ears are the cries of the stricken, and I can see, as I have seen in the past, all the marring and mangling of the sweet, beautiful flesh, and souls torn with violence from proud bodies and hurled to God. Thus do we poor humans attain our ends, striving through carnage and destruction to bring lasting peace and happiness upon the earth. And then I am lonely, and I do not think of what is to come, think of what has been and is no more. My eagle, beating with tireless wings the void, soaring towards whatever, what was ever his sun, the flaming ideal of human freedom. I cannot sit idly by and wait the great event that is his making, though he is not here to see. He devoted all the years of his manhood to it, and for it he gave his life. It is his handiwork. He made it. And so it is, in this anxious time of waiting, that I shall write of my husband. There is much light that I alone, of all persons living, can throw upon his hair. And so noble a hair cannot be blazoned forth too brightly. He was a great soul, and when my love grows unselfish, my chiefest regret is that he is not here to witness tomorrow's dawn. We cannot fail. He is built too stoutly and too surely. Woe to the iron wheel! Soon it shall be thrust back from off prostrate humanity. When the world goes forth, the labor hosts of the world shall rise. There has been nothing like it in the history of the world. The solidarity of labor is assured. For the first time, will there be an international revolution? Why, as the world why? You see, I am full of what is impending. I have lived it day and night utterly for so long that it is ever pursuing in my mind. For that matter, I cannot think of my husband without thinking of him. He was the soul. How can I possibly separate the two from? As I have said, there is much light that I alone can throw upon his character. It is well known that he toiled hard for liberty and suffered so. How hard he toiled, how greatly he suffered, all know. For I have been with him during those 20 anxious years, and I know his patience, his untiring effort, and devotion to the cause, through which only 2 months gone, he laid down his life. I shall try to write simply, to tell here how Ernest Everard changed my life, how I first met him, how he grew until I became a part of him, the tremendous changes he wrought in my life. In this way you may look at him through my eyes, through him, silent, in all save the things, too secret and too sweet for me to tell. It was in February 1912 that I met him, when, as a guest at my father's dinner, came to our house in Berkeley. And I cannot say that my first impression of him was favorable. He was one of many at dinner, and in the drawing room, where we gathered and waited for all to arrive, he made a rather incongruous appearance. It was preacher's night, as my father privately called it, and Ernest was certainly out of place in the midst of the church. In the first place, his clothes did not fit him. He wore a ready-made suit, dark cloth, that was ill-adjusted to his body. In fact, no ready-made suit of clothes could ever fit his body. And on this night, as always, the cloth pulled with his muscle, the coat between his shoulders, what of the heavy shoulder development, was a maze of wrinkles. His neck was of a prize fighter, thick, strong. So this was the social philosopher, an ex-horseshoer my father had discovered, was my father, and he certainly looked it, with those bulging muscles and that full throat. I immediately classified him, a sort of prodigy, I thought, a blind Tom of the working class. But then when he shook hands with me, his handshake was firm and strong, but he looked at me boldly with his black eyes. Jubilant, I thought. You see, I was a creature of environment, and at that time had strong class instincts. Such coldness on the part of a man of my own class would have been almost unforgivable. I know that I could not avoid dropping my eyes, and I was quite relieved when I passed him on, turned to greet Bishop Morehouse, a favorite of mine, a sweet and serious man of middle age, Christ-like in appearance and goodness, and a scholar as well. But this boldness that I took to be presumption was a vital clue to the nature of Ernest Everhard. He was simple, direct, afraid of nothing, and he refused to waste time on conventional mannerisms. You please me, he explained long afterwards. Why should I not fill my eyes with that which pleases me? I have said that he was afraid of nothing. He was a natural aristocrat, and in spite of this fact, he was in the camp of the non. He was a super blond beast such as Nietzsche had described. And in addition, he was a flame with democracy. In the interest of meeting the other guests, and what of my unfavorable impression, I forgot all about the working class philosopher, though once or twice again I noticed him, especially twinkle in his eye as he listened to the talk, first of one minister and then of another. He has humor, I thought, and I almost forgave him the clothes. Time went by, the dinner went by, he never opened his mouth to speak while the ministers talked interminably about the working class and its relation to the church, and what the church had done, and what it was doing for it. I noticed that my father was annoyed because Ernest did not talk. Once father took advantage of a lull and asked him to say something. Ernest shrugged his shoulders, and with a "I have nothing to say," he went on eating salted almonds. But father was not to be denied. After a while he said, "We have with us a member of the working class. I am sure that he can present things from a point of view that will be interesting and refreshing. I refer to Mr. Everhard." The others betrayed a well-mannered interest and urged Ernest for a statement of his views. Their attitude towards him was so broadly tolerant and kindly that it was really patronizing. And I saw that Ernest noted it and was amused. He looked slowly about him, and I saw the glint of laughter. I am not versed in the courtesies of ecclesiastical controversy, he began, and then hesitated with modesty and indecision. Go on, they urged, and Dr. Hammerfield said, "We do not mind the truth that is in any man, if it is sincere," he amended. "Then do you separate sincerity from truth?" Ernest laughed quickly. Dr. Hammerfield gasped. He managed to answer it. "The best of us may be mistaken. The best." Ernest's manner changed. He became another man. "All right, then," he answered. "And let me begin by saying that you are always, you know, nothing, and worse than nothing, about the working class. Your sociology is as vicious and worthless as is your method of thinking." It was not so much what he said as how he said it. I roused with the first sound of his voice. It was as bold as his eyes. It was a clarion call that filled the whole table was aroused, shaken alive from the monotony of drowsiness. "What is so dreadfully vicious and worthless in our method of thinking, young man?" Dr. Hammerfield demanded. And already there was something unpleasant in his voice and manner of utterance. "You are metaphysician. You can prove anything by metaphysics, and having done so, every metaphysician can prove every other metaphysician wrong, to his own satisfaction. You are anarchists in the realm of thought, and you are mad cosmomakers. Each of you dwells in a cosmos of his own making, created out of his own fancies and designs. You do not know the real world in which you live, and your thinking has no place in the real world except in as so far as it is a phenomena of mental aberration. Do you know what I was reminded of as I sat to the table and listened to you talk and talk? You reminded me for all the world of the scholastics of the Middle Age who bravely and learnedly debated the absorbing question of how many angels could dance on the point of a needle. Why, my dear sirs, you are as remote from the intellectual life of the 20th century as an Indian medicine man making incantation in the primeval forest 10,000 years ago. As Ernest talked, he seemed in a fine part. His eyes glowed, his face glowed, his eyes snapped and flashed, and his chin and jaw were eloquent expressiveness. But it was only in a way he had. It was always aroused. It always aroused people. His smashing, sledgehammer manner of attack invariably made them forget themselves. And they were forgetting themselves now. Bishop Morehouse was leaning forward and listening intently. Exasperation and anger were flushing in the face of Dr. Hammerfield. And others were exasperated too, and some were smiling in the amused and superior way. As for myself, I found it most enjoyable. I glanced at father, and I was afraid he was going to giggle at the effect of this human bombshell he had been guilty of launching amongst them. Your terms are rather vague, Dr. Hammerfield interrupted. Just precisely what do you mean when you call us metaphysicians? I call you metaphysicians because you reason metaphysically, Ernest went on. Your method of reasoning is the opposite to that of science. There's no validity to your conclusions. You can prove everything and nothing, and no two of you can agree on anything. Each of you goes into his own consciousness to explain himself in the universe. As well you may lift yourselves up by your own bootstraps as to explain consciousness by consciousness. I do not understand, Bishop Morehouse said. It seems to me all that all things of the mind are metaphysical, and that most exact and convincing of all sciences, mathematics, is surely metaphysical. Each and every thought process of the scientific reasoner is metaphysical. Truly, you will agree with me. As you say, you do not understand, Ernest replied. The metaphysician reasons deductively, out of his own subjectivity. The scientist reasons inductively, from the facts of experience. The metaphysician reasons from theory to facts. Scientific reasons from facts to theory. The metaphysician explains the universe by himself. The scientist explains himself by the universe. Thank God we are not scientists, Dr. Hammerfield murmured complacently. What are you, then? Ernest demanded. Philosophers. There you go, Ernest laughed. You have left the real and solid earth and are up in the air with a word for a flying machine. Pray come down to earth and tell me precisely what do you mean by philosophy? You see why I like this guy? Cringe. Oh, oh. Okay. Okay. Sit up straight. God damn it. Posture. God damn it. No, fair enough. Thank you, Sam. Um, let's see. Okay. 40 minutes of this book. Okay. Well, I guess I also did some preamble, didn't I? How far are we to the end of this chapter? We're still a good, like, few pages from the end of this chapter. Um, yeah. Clearly, lovely. Um, I have had similar conversations. For a long time, I mean, I have to kind of fictionalize some of these events because the person that I will be referring to had you're I'll it'll come up, but ultimately I'm just changing some names. That's all I'm saying. I used to have, or being really vague, one of the two. I used to have this friend. We'll call him Bob. Me and Bob played a lot of music together. When we first met, we were very similarly politically aligned. We had a lot of a lot more in common than we did that was different from each other. We a very valuable friendship emerged. We watched movies together. We talked philosophy. We talked all kinds of other social theory and things like that. We did illicit substances and things of that nature. We were very tight. But time goes on, people change, and not always for the better, if I'm being honest with you. My friend and I went through quite a bit together, my sobriety for one, and their conversion to a certain religious organization, a specific kind of church and belief system that, I mean, at first I thought was more or less harmless. I didn't know anything about it. It was like a phrase I had heard, but had never been able to put any amount of no study into it. No, I knew nobody who belonged to this church, this organization, so I never had reason to question it. And I think I've talked pretty extensively about my own belief system. That I don't have anything against. I'm not a cringe atheist, Satanist weirdo. I gave that up a long time ago. Actually, in part because of the earliest versions of these conversations I'd be having with this specific friend. And those conversations leading me further into some religious study. Not like anything university level or anything like that, but just I grew up in a religious household, and so I definitely was a cringe atheist for a long time, starting in sixth grade when I learned that, half of the gods from around the planet and through its history predate Christ by a long, 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 long time. So I just thought that was weird. I was like, wait, so if religion existed before Jesus and before God, then why do we believe in anything? This is all stupid. None of this is real. I hate it. And I got really mad, except for Greek mythology, because it was pretty tight, and gay and violent. And I liked that shit. I still do. Actually, I would have been reading Greek mythology stuff today, but you know what's weird about Greek mythology is none of it was ever written down at the time. Very little of it, actually, correctly, very little of it was actually ever written down. And most of it is just was told word of mouth for so long and through so many different versions of it. We're able to study it now only because of those tellings and retellings and retellings. The majority of the versions of Greek mythology that we know in our current era is all none of it is concrete. None of it is anything that a Greek person living in ancient Greece would have believed. Not one. They're modern encapsulations of these folktales, of this mythology. And of course, some of these interpretations were written a long time ago, 1600s, even further back than that. Jesus, I mean, people have been writing about Greek mythological characters for most of written history. So yeah, but and so most of these stories are um, not in the public domain because a specific author wrote down his version of it, their version of it, and published that work, and that work is still under copyright. At least as far as I understand, I could be kind of misreading things here, but that's how I interpret it. Most of the collections of mythological tales I have, oh, pardon me, if I wasn't reading this wrong, are not public domain. So, uh, yeah, I mean, which is so funny because I was so defensive of Greek mythology in the way that I saw it when I watched like Hercules, not the Kevin Sorbo, the Disney. Um, I watched that movie when I mean, it came out, I think around the same time we were having this class, on like in sixth grade on world religions where I learned all of this stuff and had these big revelations in my life and became a cringe little atheist for the first time. Uh, yeah, and I watched that movie and I was like, that's not at all the Hercules that I know, or as I would have said at the time, the Heracles that I knew. As it was, Hercules is the Roman adaptation of uh, translation, I guess, of Heracles. Heracles, because Hera, the Greek goddess, wife of Zeus, as Zeus had Hercules out of wedlock, which caused Hera to curse Hercules, even though Zeus was like, I cheated on you, but I named the baby that I had with this random lady after you. Does that make up for it, honey? And she was like, no, bitch, I hate you. I fucking hate you. Um, yeah, very interesting. But yeah, I always thought, and like I would have said at the time, that's like a concrete fact about the character. And yeah, from a historical perspective, absolutely, Hercules was called Hercules before he was called Heracles. But that iteration of the events, that explanation of those events, is entirely, really my own creation. Um, that is an interpretation of a previous author's interpretation of that character. Uh, it is ultimately still the exact same format, but modernized continually throughout history, which is honestly why it remains fascinating as a point of study. Because at a certain point, it no longer is about the mythology; it's all about history, and social theory, which is fucking sick. Mythology is rad. It's it doesn't matter what religion. That's my point. Is that I am at this point a lot more open-minded about it. I don't want to make people feel bad, and especially if it's something that helps you and makes you feel like you have a better life. Am I incredibly critical of people who? Let me return to my story. Me and my friend, we started having these. We'd always had long conversations, and at many points in them, we would disagree. Sometimes, uh, uh, like vehemently disagree with one another on certain subjects. But when the church that he was going to started coming up, started becoming a focal point of these arguments, and his activities with this church, like attending anti-abortion rallies and things of that nature, I started having like, hey, so I'm not judging you because of your religion, but I am judging you because of your social politic, and I think that you're being a dork is the thing. And you're like, I need you to know that I can't fuck with that. I don't vibe with that shit, and I don't understand how you can. Let's talk about it. We would have these long conversations about why and things like that, and no matter how much evidence I presented, how much uh, uh, real life, genuine fact presented as counter arguments to many of the things that uh, he would be bringing into these conversations, um, he would always default to this position that is ultimately you can't prove something contrary to my belief system, and I cannot prove something contrary to yours. Saying ultimately that real life factual evidence of social theory that we had previously agreed on, frustratingly, was suddenly no longer valid because of the, as the Iron Heel would put it, metaphysics of the belief system of the church. And his statement ultimately being that, and I can see a truth in it, in that, no, I can't prove that there is no God, just as he can't prove that there is one. But that is irrelevant when we get to talking about life on this planet, social theory, community, people, dealing with one another in a equitable and agreed upon manner. And that is where facts ought to matter, where evidence is supposed to matter. And as the Iron Heel and many others would say, some people cannot pull their head out of their own asshole. I can't remember. I was watching something this morning that actually touched upon this too. What the fuck was I watching? Oh yeah, it was Wine About It. Shout out to Wine About It. I know they don't know who we are, but I absolutely adore their work. Cutie and Maya are do an incredible podcast called Wine About It. They're well known. They probably don't need an introduction from me, but if you're watching me and you don't know who they are, I definitely go recommend watching their YouTube channel. Very funny, very cool conversations they have. And that one I was watching this morning talked about how this exact kind of phenomenon, where especially social conservatives will never be swayed by facts or information. They're like QAnon people are never going to, in their 50s or 60s, take account for all of the lies that they are being fed and go, shit, I'm wrong, and change their mind and change their life. They're just going to be wrong forever, and then they die. It sucks. And there are probably an absolute minority of people within those kinds of groups, these incredibly radical, right-wing, dumb shits that will and can change their minds, but the vast, incredible majority of them would never do that. And that's tragic. It's why politics are being called so divisive, because socially, by and large, our country is fairly center liberal. I wouldn't even say center left, but in the center, ultimately. A very small minority of people are to the right, politically and socially, economically and socially. But like, I think it's something like 60 or 60% or higher are more ideologically in the camp of I wouldn't say progressive, but a more politically central kind of way of looking at the world. And as a result of that, in many cases, have been pulled slightly to the left, just ever so slightly, or at least are able to be convinced of certain policies when you remove the words from them. Things like free healthcare sounds a lot different than socialized healthcare. And I know that most of you probably watching this are going to understand exactly why this is important. Messaging and optics and all of that shit that us fucking weirdos pay attention to. But normal people don't, is the thing. And in a way, that's how we're able to, people like AOC and Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, a lot of the more progressive members of our the political machine are have driven a lot more public, and Bernie Sanders, I think, is another really great example of this, have driven a lot of conversation and movement towards more progressive, more acceptance towards progressive policies, while people are still not necessarily ideologically changing anything about themselves, but because of the kind of cultural and social landscape that we live in currently, it's, I mean, even just less divisive than a lot of the radical right Republican side of the political spectrum tends to be. And in that way is more easily consumed and understood, because it's not, you know, Hillary Clinton is Saturn eating children, fucking babies every day of her life. Because that's an insane thing to think that is real. Not that I think Hillary Clinton is some amazing feminist icon like some people might, but because she's not. But also, because that's an insane thing to think. That's absolute cocoa bananas. It doesn't make. It's not a thing that any people do in history have never done. So it's just it's pulp. It's fiction is the thing. Maybe that's why it's so easy to believe, because so much of our society is based around fictionalized versions of real world events. Like, you know, what's being taught in schools now about indigenous people living in living on this land before colonialism, like what we're taught about, what people are currently being taught about slavery in many states, that they were just indentured servants and shit like that. That is just disgusting fiction. It's historical fiction written by bad people. So yeah, you know what? Thank you, Sam. I really needed that. I completely lost where I was going. I remembered I was talking about the Iron Heel, and that's when I paused, because I was like, "What the fuck am I talking about right now?" Oh, me and my buddy, more or less, you know, right around the same time that he picked up this church, he also started watching a lot of Jordan Peterson videos. And anybody who knows anything about society right now knows that as soon as you start watching Jordan Peterson videos and not laughing at Jordan Peterson and his Kermit the Frog voice and his bad suits, actually, I'm not gonna lie, I like some of those suits, but it doesn't matter. He's a bad brain person. He has dumb shit where his brain should be. Um, so and if you know, and you know that once you start watching Jordan Peterson videos and taking them seriously, you're on the first step towards the alt-right rabbit hole that few people will ever escape from. And that's why I don't talk to that person anymore. And that's why the Iron Heel, this first chapter of the Iron Heel, is so interesting to me as a person, because I've literally had conversations just like this. You're coming from a place that has nothing to do with reality. You live in the fucking sky with no feet or no toe touching grass anywhere on the surface level of this planet. You have never talked to a worker about the realities they face, and if you did, you would probably call them a fucking liar. It's an incredible privilege to be such a dumb shit. And it takes incredible privilege to continue that dumbassery. And that is where I would like to take a break. I'll be back in probably like 10, 15 at the most. Thank you very much. Enjoy.
turn. They chew on their cud and spit it out on the street. If all will die, motherfucker, read the sign. Yeah. I'm no B-man, I'm no B-man. I get better every day. I'm no B-man, I'm no B-man. I get better every day. I'm no B-man, I'm no B-man, no. I get better every day. I'm no B-man, I'm no B-man, no. I get better every day, yeah. It's a dangerous game to play with big cats. They really know how to bite, and it's a mutual respect between lion and tamer. Lights are hot as they bob and weave, and in this temple of chain link antique, my whip sings the word of God. And when the lights lay low and the lions take sleep, will sing songs of my noble feet. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'd say it's hard to be human, but I know I can. I know I can. And you might say that there is so much sin. Don't you quit, and I won't quit. And you might say it's so dark in here, but never fear, for I am here. And you might say it's hard to be human, but I will can. I'm no big man. Little black and white pieces dance and die on the chessboard. Let's get drunk and shout at the pawns. This game of strip chess has gone on long as it needs to. I'm tired, let's go to bed. Intangible female kicks softly and sweep ahead. Honey bees never sounded so sweet. No, they didn't. Not in a million fucking years. I'm no B-man, I'm no B-man. I get better every day. I'm no B-man, I'm no B-man. I get better every day. I'm no B-man, I'm no B-man, no. I get better every day. I'm no
All right, folks, we're back. Thank you for hanging in there with us while I went to the bathroom and cleared my throat of all of the phlegm that acquired there when I started doing that Conan the Barbarian voice. Um, yeah. So you were talking about we're celebrating Pulp. We're celebrating Pulp today, and all of its many forms. Unfortunately, we have only 2 hours left, and to be honest, my voice will probably only hold up if I keep doing voices like Conan. But voice actors have it hard, okay? Departure. Sam, you might actually be interested in this. What do you know about the voice actor who played Trent in Daria? Nothing since Daria. Nothing. Yeah. What was his name? Alvaro Gonzalez, if I'm not mistaken. Alvaro Gonzalez played Trent in all through Daria, and then quit and seemingly disappeared off the face of the planet. He's not. He doesn't have a wiki. He doesn't have like a website. He doesn't have any social media that I could find. I kind of was stalking him last night, and if he was on the internet, I guarantee you would have found him. I find motherfuckers. It's something I do. Um, maybe he's, yeah, that's totally possible. I don't know, but my guy has a very interesting career because before Daria, all the guy was doing was a lot of he did like 10 mid to late 90s anime dubs. That was where he started his career. It was just with like dubs of what was one of the names of some of the titles he did? Globe Breeders. I think it was called Globe Breeders, like Globe Breeders, which probably horny. I mean, a name like that probably inappropriately horny. But yeah, he did like 10 or so like very. I haven't seen any of these anime if I'm being honest with you. But he did a bunch of the dubs for these, and then booked a gig with Daria. That was like all there is to tell about this guy on the internet, which is fascinating, especially if you are an actor in the modern era. Like, you know how important it is to be online, at least have your presence online so that people can find you, so that you can get more work and uh, I mean, build a fandom, ultimately build a brand around who you are. It's an incredibly frustrating aspect of doing art, is doing a bunch of stuff that has nothing to fucking do with art, including selling yourself, which most artists are kind of reticent to actually do.
I don't mind it, but I'm terrible at it.
Yeah, exactly. Me and Sam are kind of in the same boat here, where it's like, I'm fine with promoting myself. I like what I do, and I want people to see it. So yeah, but I also know that it can be kind of annoying, and I don't want my entire because I only am on social media. The reason I started my MySpace account was because between my sophomore and junior year of high school, my mom was like, "You can't be here this summer. I don't want you in snow, or I don't want you in Reading this summer." We had a weird relationship. I've talked about it a lot. And I went and lived with my dad for all 3 months of summer in a town I knew nobody, had no friends, and didn't have transportation. It was I watched a lot of movies. That's what I did, and played Nintendo 64 because it was the only console my dad had. Um, yeah, it was depressing. If I'm honest, I was in a relationship. I did. I had done theater during the summer at one point, and at like a local repertory theater, and it really bothered me that I was being booted out of the house for no real apparent reason. So I lived with my dad, and I started a MySpace so that I could stay in touch with my friends up north. And I kept that MySpace once I moved down to Sonoma County when I graduated high school. And through that MySpace, I started putting out like information about what I was doing with like my bands, but mostly I was just communicating with my old friends who, I had no real other way of communicating with them other than by like phone calls. And like this was even like smartphones weren't a thing yet. We were still fucking on iPods, all right? So, yes, I mean, we were flip phones and iPods. I had an iPod Shuffle, in fact, at this point. Which didn't even have a screen. What about my screen time? I need my screen time. But yeah, I wouldn't have a smartphone until I was in like my mid-20s, actually. Long after, late 20s, probably. Long after they were a thing. I didn't like the idea. I'm paranoid, and they make me paranoid. So I didn't get one for a long time. I didn't have text, ever. I didn't have text until, like, I got my first iPhone, like, in 2000 and, I don't know, 15, something like that. Like, I had lived a full life, booked shows, done everything normal people do now, but just in a way that was kind of old school. Raw dogging the planet. I shouldn't put it that way. So yeah, that was why I got on social media. I was to keep in contact with a lot of my old friends. But now I have to use it as like a job. And I tell you what, that makes it not fun. Especially when I was posting the other day, I thought about it. I like went to post something that was kind of like a funny observation, and I was like, oh, I'm looking for work right now. I have to make this friends only. Because if a potential employer does the thing where they look at your social media, I'm not going to get this job with some of the shit I say. So that's additionally frustrating. Not to mention the fact that, like, as an artist, having strong opinions about things like I tend to have also limits the amount of creative work you get because turns out capitalists don't like it when you're an anti-capitalist. They think you're like an enemy or something. It's like, I mean, you're not allowed to think that. You're my enemy, you stupid fuck. But capitalists do tend to be really stupid fucks. So we just kind of have to contend with that and move on. And that's why I know I'll never work for Disney, because I've talked a lot of shit about them on the internet for like 20 years or something. It's amazing. It's what you get for being me. You preclude any amount of work for just having opinion. Anyway, point is, that was a complete aside from this whole program where we're celebrating Pulp. I have less time than necessary to get through all of the selections I have pulled right now, but I have prioritized them. So first and foremost, I want to read to you from one of my favorite books. So L. Frank Baum was an absolute nutcase, and in no no adaptation of the Oz books has that ever been apparent. I think Return to Oz gets kind of close. And I can say that The Wiz is very creative, although I don't think they were referencing the books. I'm pretty sure they were referencing the movie, the Judy Garland movie, for most of what they were doing, which is like a Funhouse mirror version of The Wizard of Oz. Honestly, I really like all of the adaptations of Oz books that I've seen, but like I said, none really capture the insanity of this man's writing. Alfred Baum was actually a pretty interesting dude. Obviously problematic by today's standards, but I'm pretty sure he was living in like the late 1800s is when he was producing. but honestly one of the best writers that I've read of the time period, because he's approaches words like a fucking goblin would. And if you know me, if you've been watching this program for any amount of time, you know that that's exactly my vibe. I am a little goblin, and yeah, I would desperately love to see an adaptation of the Oz books that embraces shit that this guy like. Let me just get into it. I'm reading from the. I already misspoke. I don't want to do that again. The Marvelous Land of Oz. Marvelous Land of Oz. The second book in the Oz, the second of the Oz books. This is actually really reminiscent. If you've seen Return to Oz, this is ultimately what it seems they were pulling from. A little bit of Wizard, a little bit of Marvelous Land. I think even a little bit of Ozma. I mean, mostly it's just the Wizard of Oz, the Wonderful Wizard. But Return to Oz is basically the adaptation of this book with several key things changed. This book has it all. Inanimate objects brought to life, revolution. I don't want to spoil anything for you, but talks about gender in a way that I've never seen a kid's book talk about until like the modern era. It is insane. Also, just want to point out that no, it doesn't matter. So, the Marvelous Land of Oz, Chapter 1, Tip manufactures a pumpkin head. Pardon me. In the country of Gillikins, which is at the north of the Land of Oz, lived a youth called Tip. There was more to his name than that. Poor old Mombi often declared that his whole name was Tiptarius, but no one was expected to say such a long word when Tip would do just as well. This boy remembered nothing of his parents, for he had been brought when quite young to be reared by the old woman known as Mombi, whose reputation, I am sorry to say, was none of the best. For the Gillikin people had reason to suspect her of indulging in the magical arts, and therefore hesitated to associate with her. Mombi was not exactly a witch, because the good witch who ruled that part of Oz had forbidden any other witch to exist in her dominions. So Tip's guardian, however much she might aspire to working magic, realized it was unlawful to be more than a sorceress, or at most a wizardess. Do you see what I fucking mean? Tip was made to carry wood from the forest that the old woman might boil in her pot. He also worked in the cornfields, hoeing and husking, and he fed the pigs and milked the four-horned cow that was Mombi's special pride. But you must not suppose he worked all the time, for he felt that would be bad for him. When sent to the forest, Tip often climbed trees for birds' eggs, or amused himself chasing the fleet of white rabbits, or fishing in the brooks with bent pins. Then he would hastily gather his armful of wood and carry it home. And when he was supposed to be working in the cornfields, and the tall stalks hid him from Mombi's view, Tip would often dig in the gopher holes, or if the mood seized him, lie upon his back between the rows of corn and take a nap. So by taking care to not exhaust his strength, he grew as strong and rugged as a boy may be. Mombi's curious magic often frightened her neighbors, and they treated her shyly yet respectfully because of her weird powers. But Tip frankly hated her, and took no pains to hide his feelings. Indeed, sometimes he showed less respect for the old woman than he should have done. considering she was his guardian. There were pumpkins in Mommy's cornfields, lying golden red among the rows of green stalks, and these had been planted and carefully tended that the four-horned cow might eat of them in the wintertime. But one day, after the corn had all been cut and stacked, Tip was carrying the pumpkins to the stable. He took the notion to make a jack-lantern and try and give an old woman a fright with it. So he selected a fine big pumpkin, one with a lustrous orange-red color, and began carving it. With the point of his knife, he made 2 round eyes, a 3-cornered nose, and a mouth shaped like a new moon. The face, when completed, should not have been considered strictly beautiful, but it wore a smile so big and broad, and so it was jolly in expression, that even Tip laughed as he looked admiringly at his work. The child had no playmates, so he did not know that boys often dig out the inside of a pumpkin jack, and the space thus made put a lighted candle to render the face more startling. But he convinced an idea of his own that promised to be quite as effective. He decided to manufacture the form of a man who would wear this pumpkin head, and to stand it in a place where old Mommy would meet it, face to face. And then, Tip said to himself, with a laugh, she'll squeal louder than the brown pig does when I pull her tail, and shiver with fright, worse than I did last year when I had the ague. He had plenty of time to accomplish this task, for Mommy had gone to a village to buy groceries, she said, and it was a journey of at least 2 days. So he took his axe to the forest, selected some stout, straight saplings, which he cut down and trimmed of all of their twigs and leaves. From these he would make arms and legs and feet of a man. For the body, he stripped a sheet of thick bark from around a big tree, and with much labor fashioned it into a cylinder about the right size, pinning the edges together with wooden pegs. Then, whistling happily as he worked, he carefully joined the limbs and fastened them to the body with pegs, whittled into shape with his knife. By the time this feat had been accomplished, it began to grow dark, and Tip remembered he must milk the cow and feed the pigs. So he picked up his wooden man and carried it back to the house. During the evening, by the light of the fire in the kitchen, Tip carefully rounded the edges of the joints and smoothed the rough places in a neat and workmanlike manner. Then he stood the figure up against the wall and admired it. It seemed remarkably tall, even for a full-grown man. But that was a good point in the small boy's eyes, and Tip did not object to the size of his creation. Next morning, when he looked again at his work, Tip saw that he had forgotten to give the dummy a neck, by means of which he might fasten the pumpkin head to the body. So he went again to the forest, which was not far away, and chopped from a tree several pieces of wood with which to complete his work. When he returned, he fastened a crosspiece to the upper end of the body, making a hole through the center and to hold it upright. The bit of wood which formed this neck was also sharpened at the other end, and when all was ready, Tip put on the pumpkin head, pressing it well down into the neck, and found that it fitted very well. The head could be turned to one side or the other as he pleased, and the hinges of the arms and legs allowed him to place the dummy in any position he desired. Now that, declared Tip proudly, is really a fine man. It ought to frighten several screeches out of old Mombi, but it would be much more lifelike if it were properly dressed. To find clothing seemed no easy task. But Tip boldly ransacked the great chest in which Mombi kept all her keepsakes and treasures, and at the very bottom he discovered some purple trousers, a red shirt, and a pink vest which was dotted with white stripes. These he carried away to his man, and succeeded, although the garments did not fit well, in dressing the creature in a jaunty fashion. Some knit stockings belonging to Mombi, and a much-worn pair of his own shoes completed the man's apparel, and Tip was so delighted that he danced up and down, and laughed aloud in boyish ecstasy. "I must give him a name!" he cried. So good a man as this must surely have a name, I believe. He added, after a moment's thought, I will name this fellow Jack Pumpkinhead. Creative. Tip's a good little guy. He's a weird little dude. I have time. I'm gonna keep going. I mean, Baum is another one of the authors I would refer to when we were talking about uh, uh, writers of the past that would produce their work in serialized form, like a television show. We do today, but not in books, because what the fuck are those? I've never seen one. What do they do? They got words on paper? That seems wasteful. I don't know. But yeah, talking before we came back about how like you have books like this, and many others that because a publisher knows that books you're encouraged to read to children, right? It's like one of those things that's been parenting 101 since time immemorial. I don't even know when it started, but telling your children stories is just something humans do. I mean, we tell everybody stories. But children is something that's seen as like almost universal, right? So a publisher is more willing to publish a book that can be marketed to children, especially with the aid of illustrations. And this is no different. These are beautifully illustrated by one of the like traditional Oz artists, W.W. Denslow and John R. Neal. And they're really wonderful, very simple illustrations that I absolutely adore. And yes, absolutely. I think illustrations in children's books definitely get them more invested. But it's a interesting conundrum because, like, I like pictures. What are adults not supposed to like pictures? Wouldn't it be cool if, like, you read Steinbeck and there was like fully illustrated pages every few pages? Like, wouldn't that be fucking sick? Like, I'm sorry. Do we not have joy in this world? Are we not allowed some cute little pictures in a book? Because we're of a certain age? Absolutely absurd concept. I hate it. I love pictures. I read comics. That's how I learned how to read. Was comic books. Literally, as a child, that was one of the things. I had a cousin. My one of my best buds to this day. I love them so much. Actually, I referred to them earlier. Hi, Gerard. I forgot. Brain bad. Small thing. But yeah, Gerard did a similar thing, or the same thing. I think that's where my mom got the idea, was because Gerard started reading comic books before, like, anything else. So I remember we visited a lot together. I read some of his... I think at a certain point we were both very, very small children. I think Gerard's like a year older than me. He, like, showed me a bunch of his comics, and kind of like a child teaching another child to read. It wasn't necessarily effective, but it got me interested. And so we went, and at the time there was a comic book store not too far from where we lived when I was a little kid. And I think I got some Batman. I think I got some weird ones that were of an adult subject matter that I had no business reading. I remember getting Barbed Wire, like an issue of Barbed Wire. My mom did no research or like no ask no questions of anyone working in the store. I don't even know how you could miss Barbed Wire. Her boobs are just one of the prominent features of any cover that you put a Barbed Wire character in. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying. But yeah, it was very fascinating, the collection of comic books. It's also where I got introduced to X-Men and Marvel Comics in general. I mean, That's how I learned how to read. And I never stopped liking pictures because I got to a certain age. That's an absurd thing to happen. I don't understand how that works. Wouldn't it be cool if, like, you read fucking Chuck Palahniuk and there was illustrations every few pages? His books call for shit like that. Sam brought up... who is your example, Sam? I don't remember.
Brave New World, Aldous Huxley.
Yeah, how fucking sick would an illustrated version of Brave New World be? I would read the fuck out of it. I've read Brave New World like 5 times already. I love that book. But I would love it even more if it were illustrated. Who wouldn't? Pictures are cool! Get over it, society! But yeah, Sam brought up that a major reason that most books don't have illustrations, extra pages, more money. Capitalism ruins everything. I hate this country.
Yeah,
I hate capitalism. Free me from this mortal coil.
Extra pages,
sorry, Sam.
it's a lot of ink. Most of the time you want color illustrations. That's at least 3 to 4 runs through a printer with ink to get the right colors. It gets wildly expensive very quickly as someone who has worked in graphic design and had to create things for books.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to recognize that. Not necessarily from the perspective of, like, capital, but from the perspective of, like, us. Like, you know, I often... In fact, just this afternoon, I was talking about another wonderful piece of pulp that we don't call pulp, anime. I was talking about anime with my old buds. We have our little group chat. We talked about silly things. And we were talking about the One Piece anime. And I was talking about, like, yeah, I'm at this point in the series. I'm really enjoying, you know, all that... the character development, ultimately, that takes place not just for the characters within the story and the world itself as the anime manga continues forward, but also that happens within us, the audience, and the author. I think I've talked about this on previous episodes. Oda is one of the many people who talked about, who's been on record talking about how, like, you know, their early work reflected their perspective as younger people. And as they grew as writers, their perspective changed and grew with them. And they brought that into the work that they were doing. Berserk is another great example of this same kind of thing. In fact, we were talking about Bob Howard in a similar place. Although that takes place within the span of just 10 years, that also mirrors his perspective as a younger man looking at ahead at his future that would no longer come. Amazing. But yeah, we were talking about that and how that's a fascinating kind of interaction with media that we tend to have as an audience as well, because we're growing alongside the media, alongside the creators of this media, and we're all growing as people and changing, and it's a beautiful process. But I was like, but I'm always gonna hate on shit when I'm watching a fucking show, and then for like 6 episodes, right before a climax, we have fucking flashbacks to episodes that we've already done, we've already watched. You're insulting my intelligence. You know, I am astute. I am aware of the progression of these characters, their motivations for being here, and what they're doing. I understand. I've internalized this shit because these characters are cool. I like them. They're important to me. Even so, I will never not hate on shit like that where they're just doing recaps of backstory and shit like that for like 6 episodes right before a climactic moment. And it's just like, let me just see the fight. And I was reminded by our dear friend that most of the time when this happens in anime, it's because the anime is going faster than the manga. Manga, and especially in the case of One Piece and a lot of others. In fact, I'm pretty sure this is pretty typical of the of manga generally. Is that it is typically the work of one person doing both art and the writing of the story. It is a singular work. Obviously, they collaborate in a sense with editors and publishers and things of that nature. But by and large, there are many anime many mangaka that are doing all of it by themselves. Another great example is Kira or fucking Miyazaki's One Piece, or not One Piece. Miyazaki's Nausicaa was a manga before it was ever made into a film. And I guess a lot of people don't know this, but the manga is fucking drop dead gorgeous, and goes into a lot more of the backstory. Just like, I mean, Akira is a huge fucking series of giant fucking books, but you know, it's more in depth than the feature film anime can be. Anyway, so my friend carefully explained to me that, yeah, the reason why a lot of shows serialized anime is because the show has surpassed where the author has gotten in the manga. And they have to kind of kill time while the author gets through a couple of issues of the manga so that they can put out the next story. Which, you know, on its face seems like, oh, that's frustrating. That we would have to wait for them to catch up, you know. But imagine if instead of doing all of these filler episodes, recapping episodes, reruns, relabeled as new episodes, as frustrating. I imagine if the wait was just longer, and instead of waiting a month for the manga to catch back up, we just waited and didn't get a show every month or every week or whatever the release schedule is. And the creative team, the artists, and everyone working on staff to produce the manga or to produce the anime have more time to do their jobs as best as they can to improve upon what they've already done. Which, if you know anything about the animation industry, you know everybody is always crunch. Everything is crunch. There is no not crunch. You are always crunch. Which, I mean, doesn't give artists the opportunity, many people working in the industry, to look back at their work and try and improve upon what they've already done. They have to just release it and get the next one going. Release what they're working on and get the next one going. Constantly in a flux, not necessarily being able to look back at old work. Sometimes your not best work comes out and they don't send it back to you to get touched back up because you fucked something up. It just gets put out. It's, you know, in production. Even something you're not proud of. This is insanely common in the industry. So just imagine if they had more time. Every episode would be better. Every single one. Would we, the audience, be upset? I don't think it's upset. No. I think if we're conditioned to immediacy. We're conditioned to not have any patience. Look at how that turned out for Game of Thrones. Just fucking sit on it for a second. Because everybody hates Game of Thrones. Anything past, like, I don't like anything past the 5th season. After Tyrion shoots Tywin, I'm like, that's the end. I mean, that's basically where I stopped caring. Not because I hated that moment, because I absolutely adored that moment, and the next moment is completely underwhelming. Everything that happens after that is just like, oh, I don't fucking care about any of this anymore. The big bad is dead, killed by his son. Perfect fucking climactic kind of moment for this character, a life-changing moment. But I mean, I was just completely underwhelmed by everything that happened after that. It wasn't as powerful. Not even like, I mean, how much better could it have been if they were just patient? If they weren't trying to rush something out that isn't as good as it could be. Well, I tell you what, we wouldn't have Starbucks in shots in Game of Thrones that they probably have digitally ruined at this point, but were hilarious when it first happened. Some of the best memes of the television, of modern television, came from that. Yeah, I mean, in every case, I just think you give artists more time, you're going to get better work. If you are constantly pushing, specifically because capital demands higher and higher profit margins over time, even though that makes absolutely no sense, it just creates worse results. not that many people working in any of these very crunch-heavy kind of industries, any art industry, which does feature mostly just crunch, especially if you're working within the industry and not as freelance or whatever. Yeah, you have if you had more time with your work, you almost no artist is going to be like, I would have done worse if I had more time. I would have felt less good about myself if I had more time to work on this. I would have not appreciated being able to spend more time with my family and friends, or going on vacations or whatever. You know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense.
Which is why we don't do that here at Nerdcrafty.
Yeah, we don't crunch here. We're not industry. We're freelance and bad at making money.
I mean, that much is true. Subscribe to our Patreon.
Yeah, subscribe to our Patreon. We're like good at stuff, and we're patient. And we're not trying to like make everything suck. We're trying to put out good work.
Good content, not fast content.
Yeah, even though I mean, I don't do, if I'm being fully real with you guys, I don't do a lot of pre-work for my Live with Lava Sub episodes. Like 80% of the time, I'm literally 10 minutes before show, literally just being like, what am I fucking drawing today? I didn't think about this at all.
Wait, what? I'm kidding. I know.
No, I know. But yeah, like, that's just, I mean, honestly, in many ways, that is an expression of myself. It's a part of my process. I love improvising, and most of this program is just me doing what I'm doing right now, just infinitely yammering on about whatever topic is in my brain at the moment. Sometimes it works out really well. Like, I think the last episode was great. I'm pretty happy with what I've been doing today. Sometimes it works out like some of the episodes where I'm like really concentrated on a drawing and I'm not paying attention to anything else. But I like those episodes too. You know what's funny is I always do it in the moment. When I go back and rewatch it, the only thing I dislike about it is the fact that I'm constantly being like, oh, I'm not talking to you guys. I feel like I'm not doing a good job at this. And that kind of apology is not fun to watch. It's not engaging for you. What's engaging me is shutting the fuck up, letting the music play, and just drawing. There are a ton of successful art streamers that do exactly that every stream. Why am I beating myself up over it? It's stupid. I got a dumb brain, I tell you. But we're getting better. We're always getting better. You know, and trying to understand ourselves better. And, you know, trying to be patient. That makes good art. Patience. And not being so rushed that you can't care, you know? So, yeah, One Piece, recap episodes, Pulp, Wizard of Oz. Wizard of Oz, One Piece, kind of similar, if you think about it. Dorothy Gale, Monkey D. Luffy, same person. I don't know. Right? Is it just me? No, I am kid. But truly, there is a through line in all pulp and genre fiction that can be drawn from characters like Dorothy to Luffy. And I genuinely believe that. And if you gave me another 3 hours, we could really get into it. But we are in our last hour and 10 minutes of the program, and I have just been yammering as a pause between Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 of The Marvelous Land of Oz by L. Frank Baum. I think you got an idea of how incredible this writer can be. Even in just the first chapter of this book gets insane. I was talking... Actually, I think I interrupted myself. I'm like, no, we have to get to the reading. But what you'll find in this book is entirely different, and in all of the Oz books, entirely different characterizations for each of the characters than anything you've ever seen before. Not to mention new characters that never get brought up in the adaptations of the work. Like, I think a great example is the Woggle Bug. No one's heard of the Woggle Bug. If you haven't read the Oz books, you don't know what the fuck I'm talking about right now. The Woggle Bug, though, is a very important character in the marvelous land of Oz. He's one of the central members of the ensemble that make up, like, the Avengers of Oz that takes place in this book. That's basically what this is, the Avengers of Oz. We get the whole, most of the cast back together. Tin Man, Scarecrow, no Cowardly Lion. I can't remember what he's doing. It's been a minute since I actually read the whole book. And then you get Jack Pumpkinhead. You get if you've watched Return to Oz, you know about the Gump, the bed that they animate to life. It's amazing. And a bunch of other characters, including the Woggle Bug. And the Woggle Bug is one of my favorite things to say, just like on the internet when people are making puns, because the Woggle Bug is, like, imagine like an intellectual dad constantly punning, and thinking that it's the smartest shit anybody has ever said. That is ultimately the Woggle Bug. And the Woggle Bug's origins are very interesting because I'm summarizing and we'll probably miss some things, but some of the nuance anyway. The Woggle Bug is brought to consciousness. He is at first just a regular bug, not specified what kind, just a bug, something between an ant and a beetle. Who knows? And is flying around in a college, a professor's lab within a collegiate school, a college. And the professor is running some kind of lab experiment or something like that with his class present, and he uses a giant magnifying glass. And by accident, the Woggle Bug flies near the magnifying glass and becomes highly magnified, aka enlarged by several times his actual original size, and also given the ability to speak to people and thinks that he's really smart. Why? I don't fucking know, dude. This book is weird. So he's constantly making puns and thinking he's really fucking cool and smart. No one likes him. Nobody. But he's a central figure in the book, so he's always there. But at one point, the Tin Man straight up is just like, if you don't shut up, I'm gonna fucking murder you. Like, I'm not verbatim, but basically, that's the exact feeling that he's giving the Woggle Bug. He's like, I'm going to chop you up with my axe if you do not stop. So when people make puns on the internet, I typically call them Woggle Bug and just leave everyone confused. It's fine. We're not going to get anywhere around there. There is so much of this book. It is, Marvelous Land of Oz is literally like, this much book. It is, 120, 140 pages, something like that. Which we can't do on stream, not in the hour we have left. As much as I love the way that he writes, like a little gremlin, we're gonna move on. We're gonna move on. I don't want to, but we're gonna move on. Yeah, I was talking about a lot of public domain stuff because honestly, how do you get anything made at this point as somebody working in the media industry, except for but to do adaptation? So me and my roommate, once I got back from LA, I was talking about Treasure Island and how Disney owns every successful adaptation of the Muppets at this point. The Muppets, Treasure Island. Obviously, Muppet Treasure Island is one of the ones I'm thinking of because Disney owns the Muppets now. the 1963 or whatever adaptation is my favorite, and what I've seen the truest to the original work intention, although filtered through a very interesting lens I'm going to talk about in a second. And Treasure Planet, of course, which I didn't know until recently. It was actually kind of a cult classic. Like, it didn't do very well when it first came out. It was in that like post-Atlantis Disney World where nothing was doing that well for the company, and they were kind of like, we don't even know what to do but produce more Even Stevens and Kim Possible because that's what's working for us. The Treasure Planet didn't do well on its initial run, but is well loved now. A lot of people talk about it being their favorite version of the book. Yeah, my favorite is the 60s adaptation by Disney that they did as part of their like live action run of films that happened, I think, post Sleeping Beauty, when they were like basically bankrupt, and Sleeping Beauty almost bankrupt the company. I think I've talked about this on stream before. Sleeping Beauty was an intense process with many revisions that were not within the budget, went way, way, way over budget, and the movie did okay, but nothing like what it cost. And Disney had to change strategy. Disney definitely changed their strategy heavily after that, and did a lot more live action than animation. Especially hand-drawn animation, even then, was not cheap to produce by any means, especially not the way they were doing it. One of these pieces was Treasure Island, which was my first introduction into the story. And I genuinely still watch this back and really enjoy the movie. I think the portrayals of the characters is excellent. But what I've always noticed when I watch it back in more recent times is that, like, Hawkins is performed well by the young kid that plays him, but the character's kind of wet, like a wet blanket. Like, they're not like, they're like Luke Skywalker with less going on. And I don't mean that necessarily in a derogatory sense. They're a ingenue protagonist, there's worse examples, absolutely, than Jim Hawkins. But
they're also essentially like the player character of the book. They're the eyes that you're supposed to see everything through.
Right, and therefore you're able to kind of put yourself in them, the less detail that you give to them, right? The more the audience is able to immerse themselves in the lead character in these kind of stories, which I definitely can appreciate on a psychological level. But as a storyteller, you notice that even people who are doing the adaptations see this conundrum, that Jim is not necessarily an interesting character. He makes some interesting choices, but especially when reading the book, you realize that there's not much exposition as to why Jim is making any of these choices. Robert Louis Stevenson is actually pretty minimally spoken about the motivations of his characters in this book, which I think is fascinating. You mean, because I was talking about why this would be interesting to adapt, why it's been adapted. I was talking about how it's been adapted, ultimately. And that led me to realizing how much Long John Silver tends to be kind of the character focus of the story. He's the one given the most complicated portrayal, the most dynamic portrayal. Not just in the adaptations by the incredible actors who have played them. In fact, the actor that played John Silver in the Disney adaptation in the 60s that I enjoyed, that's that character, that actor in that film during the course of the production invents the pirate accent. The one that we all know, we all love, use it at Krusty Krab and etc. Everyone knows the pirate accent, but no one knows where it comes from. Well, not no one, but it comes literally from that movie, from that portrayal of John Silver That actor took a couple of different British regional dialects and smashed them together, and that's the pirate accent. Fucking brilliant work. Then we don't. It's like Frankenstein. We all think of Frankenstein as a square head guy. That was invented literally by Lugosi and the makeup person Jack Pierce. No one thought of Frankenstein like that before they did it. We don't even think about it. We don't give those people credit for creating the visual, very, very valid, very important visual characteristics to these characters that we recognize them. We recognize them by that these unappreciated artists. And it would be remiss not to mention it. But Long John Silver. Long John Silver is the most deep, complicated character within Treasure Island. And I thought it would be because that's the way he's written, right? And if I'm being honest, yes, in a way, he's slightly more expanded upon within the story, the book, but it's not in the way that you might think from having watched the adaptations of the work that I've mentioned. The fact that we feel they make no qualms about Robert Louis Stevenson makes no ambiguous statements about how horrible a man Long John Silver is. He makes him very clearly the central antagonist and villain of this book. He's a complicated and not any way wooden villain. He's a complex character. True. But he is definitely the villain. But in every adaptation that I have referenced so far, you see Long John Silver as an almost fatherly figure to Jim Hawkins, someone that he cares about and trusts. And sure, the betrayal that happens is definitely a part of what is like Jim's progression as a character. It definitely fuels part of his progress. But even after that betrayal, all three of the films I brought up still continue to portray him as misunderstood or the motivations being so complicated that we kind of feel for John Silver, right? We empathize, we sympathize. Well, the book doesn't do that. This is in my opinion, is a very specifically American perspective, because Long John Silver is a capitalist. He's a liar. He's a cheat. He's a betrayer. He's a thief. He doesn't have ethics. He doesn't have any care for anyone but himself. Long John Silver is a capitalist, out for the most money he can acquire for himself, to give himself the most lavish and carefree life that he can possibly have. In the book, they mention that Long John Silver is already incredibly wealthy. His wife lives in luxury in a home somewhere, yada yada, and they don't need the money. But he's still trying to fuck over this entire fucking crew to try and make the most for himself through the course of the book. Long John Silver's a capitalist, and that's why he gets an empathetic portrayal from one of the most capitalist companies on the planet, one of the most monopolists on the planet. Hard to call them that though, because monopoly for media companies evidently isn't a real thing, as decided by the Supreme Court, the fucking bastards. So yeah, they get a pass. And then why wouldn't they? I didn't expect this, but I have to pee again all of a sudden. I'll be right back. changing the way that we portray John Silver would be an interesting way to adapt it. I don't want to like I'm not actively in the process of doing that, but I'm not going to go specifically into how I would do that, just because it's not out of the realm of possibility, and there hasn't been a good Treasure Island in over a decade. Why not? Anyway, um, uh, let's crack this book open. I do think that I was surprised, as I often am when reading older books, at um, how their prose is essentially how it comes off. It often comes off very, uh, huh? Colonial, very academic in some cases, even, and it tends to be really dry. And I was surprised at how dry this reads, considering we're at sea. We ought to be very wet. But no, yeah, honestly, jokes aside, yeah, I was surprised at how dry this reads because I'm used to pulp and genre fiction that's more like Conan, where you have these short, punchy, uh, damn near poetic kind of styles of writing that don't come off as academic and feel like potent, like they have genuine humans writing them. Where in a lot of older, like cherished works, it feels like I'm reading a textbook. It's not fun. Yeah, you know, I wouldn't even say Shakespeare is boring to read. It's just, yeah, as you know, Sam, and probably most of you know, it's uh, the way that the words flow. That is just something that we're not accustomed to. It tends to be studious in trying to understand it as an actor and even as an audience, where you have to kind of like immerse yourself in a different world, in a different place, in a different time. That isn't like a fantasy. It's a immersion of your own intellectual curiosity, which, I mean, I think it's great, but I also can understand how that's a huge barrier for a lot of people who are literally just reading for fun. So that's why not a lot of people like read Shakespeare for fun, because it's not that fun. It's not that it takes time. It takes a lot of effort, and it takes. I mean, ideally, it takes some instructed study of the work and the time period and all that shit. Which who can afford that shit? I can't. I'm just lucky and did it in high school. Um, so so yeah, this is shit. I'm really bad at Roman numerals. I'm gonna admit that. What's the V with the 3 eyes? 8. Okay, I was gonna say 8. I really was. I'm not lying. But I've gotten it so wrong so many times that I just don't try anymore. Anyway, also just want to say this is a really lovely edition. Has the WC Wyeth? NC Wyeth, sorry. NC Wyeth illustrations all over it. If you don't know the Wyeth School, you should. They make really cool. They made really cool shit. Some of the most beautiful works of art. And like Frank Frazetta, we're producing incredible oil paintings and these beautiful pieces for pulp, for silly little genre book fiction. They like drawing a big dude with a sword. What the fuck's wrong with that? I love that shit. Put it in adult books. I like it. Yeah. I guess this is a big thing that I haven't said explicitly, but where we have in this country we have a separation, and almost a very clear separation, but it's not communicated ever, between art and entertainment. You have art on one side and entertainment on the other. Art makes no money. Entertainment, that can make money, depending on a lot of things. But pulp is art. Pulp is art. Genre fiction, entertainment. Popular fiction. Like Stephen King, Anne Rice, J.K. Rowling. Popular fiction. I would argue absolutely that all of them could be called pulp and could be called genre fiction. But frankly, their audience, and at least a couple of those people, not Stephen King, you know what I mean, would disagree and probably be very upset with that classification of their work because they have their nose up their asshole and are boring people. But yeah, absolutely. Pulpy as shit. I mean, especially King, let's be real. And he loves it. He loves weird little pulp shit like this. And I would argue that I don't like a lot of King's books, but we would probably dig some. I know that we dig a lot of similar shit. Like, we both love the Ramones. Dude, his short stories are better because they're more pulpy. He has to punch through a short amount of work, or a lot of work, because his brain work a lot, have a lot of idea, and he wants to push those all out, but he can't have 1,000 pages to do it like he does in so many of his works. He has to push it out in 30, 50, 100. And that makes him better, in my opinion, too, Sam. When he's writing with a purpose, when he's writing with a timeline, he's a better author. Anyway. Pulp is art. That's all I was trying to say. And we can see that through its history by incredible artists coming together and working together on beautiful pieces, collaborating in many cases, and being poor the entire time while they do it. Meanwhile, you have people in that same time period, in every time period, who work in a similar capacity, but are more acceptable, writing intentionally to be more seen as more accepting to a entertainment media that has only become more and more all-encompassing and consuming the entire industry to a point where now, like I was talking about last week, and I talk about often, independent media is, while at the same time easier to produce because of technology being cheaper and more accessible than it used to be, the ability to make money doing it, the ability for everyone from authors to actors and everything in between, the work that pays is harder to attain than, say, 50 years ago, because in the industry has become more industrial and less about finding small projects and smaller artists and then giving them a platform. Does it still happen? Absolutely, but it's less common, and there's a lot of requirement bullet points that you need to meet in order for the industry to allow you in. So, that's my rant. Let's actually, I realize we have like 45 minutes left. Let's see if I think I can get through this chapter. I think it's only a few pages. Oh, I didn't hear it, but... Oh, perfect. Okay. So, chapter 8. At the sign of the spyglass. When I had done breakfasting, the squire gave me a note addressed to John Silver, at the sign of Spyglass, and told me that I should easily find the place by following the line of the docks and keeping a bright lookout for a little tavern with a large brass telescope for a sign. I set off overjoyed at this opportunity to see some more of the ships and seamen, and picked my way among the great crowd of people and carts and bales, for the dock was now at its busiest, until I found the tavern in question. It was bright enough, the little place of entertainment. It was a bright enough little place of entertainment. The sign was newly painted, the windows had neat red curtains, the floor was cleanly sanded. pardon, and there was a street on each side, and an open door on both, which made the large, low room pretty clear to see in spite of the clouds of tobacco smoke. The customers were mostly seafaring men, and they talked so loudly that I hung at the door, almost afraid to enter. As I was waiting, a man came out of a side room, and at a glance I was sure he must be Long John. His left leg was cut off close by the hip, and under the left shoulder he carried a crutch, which he managed with wonderful dexterity, hopping about on it like a bird. He was very tall and strong, with a face as big as a ham, plain and pale, but intelligent and smiling. Indeed, he seemed in the most cheerful spirits, whistling as he moved about among the tables with a merry word or a slap on the shoulder for more favored of his guests. Now, to tell you the truth, from the very first mention of Long John and Squire Trelawney's letter, I had taken a fear in my mind that he might prove to be the very one-legged sailor whom I had watched for so long at the old Benbow. But one look at the man before me was enough. I had seen... I need some water. But one look at the man before me was enough. I had seen the captain, and Black Dog, and the blind man, Pew, and I thought I knew what a buccaneer was like. A very different creature, according to me, from this clean and pleasant-tempered landlord. It's your first clue, modern readers. I plucked up the courage at once, and crossed the threshold, and walked right up to the man where he stood, propped up on his crutch, talking to a customer. "Mr. Silver, sir?" I asked, holding out the note. Oh, do I do the pirate voice? I didn't think about this before. "Yes, my lad," he said. "Such is my name, to be sure. And who may you be?" And then he saw the squire's letter. He seemed to give me something like, almost like a start. "Oh," he cried quite loud, offering his hand. "I see. You're our new cabin boy. Pleased I am to see you. Am I doing this right? Feels off. I'll get it." And he took my hand in his large, firm grasp. Just one of the customers at the far side rose suddenly and made for the door. It was close by him, and he was out on the street in a moment, but in his hurry attracted my notice, and I recognized him at a glance. It was the tallow-faced man, wanting 2 fingers, who had first come to the Emerald Bamboo. "Oh!" I cried. "Stop him! It's Black Dog!" "I don't care 2 coppers who he is, but he hasn't paid his score. Harry, run and catch him." One of the others who was nearest the door leapt up and started in pursuit. "If he were Admiral Hawke, he shall pay his score," cried Silver, and then relinquishing my hand. "Who do you say he was?" he asked. "Black what?" "Dog, sir," I said. "Has Mr. Trelawney not told you of the buccaneers? He was one of them." "So!" cried Silver. "In my house. Ben, run and help Harry. One of those swarms, was he? Was that you drinking with him, Morgan? Step up here." The man he called Morgan, an old gray-haired, mahogany-faced sailor, came forward pretty sheepishly, rolling his quid. "Now, Morgan," said Long John very sternly, "you never clapped your eyes on that black dog before, did you?" "Not I," said Morgan, with a salute. "You did not know his name, did you?" "No, sir." "By the powers, Tom Morgan, it's as good for you," exclaimed the landlord. "If you had been mixed up with the like of that, you would never have put another foot in my house. You may lay to that. And what was he saying to you?" "I don't rightly know, sir," answered Morgan. "Did you call that a head on your shoulders or a blessed dead-eye?" cried Long John. Don't rightly know, do you? Perhaps you don't happen to rightly know who you are. Who, who you was speaking to, perhaps. Come now. What was that he jawing? Voyages, captains, ships. Pipe up, what was it? We was a talking of keel hauling, answered Morgan. Keel hauling, was ya? And a mighty suitable thing, too, and you may lay to that. Get back to your place for a love of Tom. And then, as Morgan rolled back into his seat, Silver added to me a confidential whisper that was very flattering, I thought. He's quite an honest man, Tom Morgan. Only stupid. And now, he ran on again aloud. Let's see. Black Dog. No. I don't know that name, not I. Yet, I kind of think Yes, I've seen this Rob. He used to come here with a blind beggar he used. That he did, too. You may be sure, I said. I knew that blind man, too. His name was Pew. It was, cried Silver, now quite excited. Pew! That were his name for sir. That were his name for certain. And he looked like a shark. And he looked like a shark, he did. And we run down this Black Dog now that we news for Captain Trelawney. Ben's a good runner. Few seamen run better than Ben. He should have run him down, hand over hand, by the powers. He talked to keel on him, didn't he? I'll keel on him. All the time he was jerking out these phrases, he was stumping up and down the tavern with his crutch, slapping tables with his hand, and giving such a show of excitement that, as it would have convinced an Old Bailey judge or a Bow Street runner, my suspicions had been thoroughly reawakened on finding Black Dog at the spyglass. And I watched the cook narrowly. But he was too deep, and too ready, and too clever for me, and by the time the two men had come back out of breath and confessed they had lost the track in the crowd, and had been scolded like thieves, I would have gone to bail for the innocence of Long John Silver. Foreshadowing. See here now, Hawkins, he said. There's a blessed hard thing on a man like me, now ain't it? There's Captain Trelawney, what's he to think? Here I have this confounded son of a Dutchman sitting in my own house, drinking of my own rum. Here you comes, tells me of it plain. Here I let him give us the slip before my blessed deadlights. Now, Hawkins, you do me justice with the cap'n. You're a lad, you are, but you're smart as paint. I see that when you first came in. Now, here it is. What could I do with this old timber I hobble on? When I was an A.B. mariner, I'd have come up alongside him, hand over hand, and broached him to in a brace of old shakes, I would. But now, then all of a sudden he stopped. His jaw dropped, as though he had just remembered something. The score, he burst out. Three goes a rum. Why, shiver me timbers, if I hadn't forgotten my score. And falling on a bench, he laughed till the tears ran down his cheeks. I could not help but joining, and we laughed together, peal after peal, until the tavern rang again. What a precious old sea calf I am, he said at last, wiping his cheeks. You and me should get on well, Hawkins. For now I'll take my davy. I should be rated ship's boy. But come now, stand by and to go about. This won't do. Duty is duty, messmates. I'll put on my old crooked hat and step along of you to Captain Trelawney and report this here affair. For mind you, it's serious, John Hawkins. And neither you nor me's come out of it with what I should make so bold as to call credit. Nor you either, says you, not smart. None of the pair of us smart. But my dasher buttons, that was a good un about my score. And he began again to laugh, and that so heartily that, though I did not see the joke as he did, I was again obliged to join him in his mirth. Our little walk along the quays, he made himself the most interesting companion, telling me about the different ships we passed by, their rig, tonnage, and nationality, explaining the work that was to be going forward, and how one was discharging, and another one taking in cargo, and a third making ready for sea, and every now and again telling me some little anecdote of ships or seamen, or repeating a nautical phrase until I had learned it perfectly. I began to see that here was one of the best possible shipmates. When we got to the inn, the squire and Dr. Livesley were seated together, finishing a quart of ale with a toast in it, before they should go aboard the schooner on a visit of inspection. Long John told the story from first to last, with great deal of spirit and the most perfect truth. That was how it were. Now, what it, Hawkins? He would say now and again, and I could always bear him entirely out. The two gentlemen regretted that Black Dog had got away, but we all agreed there was nothing to be done. And after he had been complimented, Long John took up his crutch and departed. All hands aboard by 4 this afternoon. Oh. All hands aboard by 4 this afternoon, shouted the squire after him. Aye, 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 sir, cried the cook in the passage. Well, squire, said Dr. Livesley, I don't put much faith in your discoveries as a general thing, but I will say this. John Silver suits me. The man's a perfect trump, cried the squire. And now, added the doctor, Jim may come on board with us, may he not? To be sure he may, says the squire. Take your hat, Hawkins. We'll see the ship. Stevenson. Uh, I appreciate the brevity in the work. Like, that was a chapter of only 4 or 5 pages and told the story from beginning to end about how Hawkins appears at Long John's tavern, and Long John starts his deception. Black Dog drinking at his bar, even by Stevenson's own illusion, foreshadowing, clearly isn't unfamiliar to Long John's tavern. Probably drinks there all the time, but he kind of uses Hawkins' perspective from writing, like as if Hawkins writing this from the future knows of Silver's later deception, but his character at the moment of first being introduced to Long John wouldn't have known that. He was being deceived. Not only was he a young boy, inexperienced, but he also was taken in by Silver's charisma, ultimately. Which it's an interesting way that I find a lot of authors at the time would foreshadow themselves out of a reveal. Like, I think it was more than likely very appropriate for the time to keep your readers abreast about the machinations that might take place further on down the road. And especially reading it from a place where I've already seen adaptations of it, and I know Silver is going to be deceiving and manipulating the situation. I'm also, so I'm coming to it already knowing about the deception as well. But reading it the first time, it was definitely like, wait, you're telling us Long John is lying to us in the work itself before we know he's lying. And that, as a reader, especially someone who, is coming at it with a modern perspective doesn't make any sense to me. Just leave it. Don't mention that Long John is later on going to betray you, because that takes a little bit of weight out of the moment when we do learn, when Hawkins is sitting inside the apple barrel and Long John is telling the mutineers in his company that he ultimately got on the ship so that they could mutiny these few British aristocrats and poor young Jim Hawkins, who found one of their old comrade, Ben Guns, not Ben Guns, is it? Bill Bones, sorry. Billy Bones, when they find his map. Um, so, yeah, and I find a number of these kind of, like, older, maybe. So the reason I'm not attributing this to Stevenson the writer and more to the style of the time is that I've read a lot of other books from a similar time period that do a very similar kind of thing, and it's obviously not what we see nowadays. Deception in a novel or in a short story is something that's fairly common, and those reveals are not uh, they're not surprising. They're so commonplace that we almost expect them in as a trope, but rarely is an author uh, foreshadowing with such a heavy hand, if they do at all. Oftentimes, you're left completely in the dark. Somebody that you spend half a book with and you grow endeared to, just like the main character or maybe ensemble would, and then they deceive you. It hits you in a similar way that hits you, the reader, as it does the characters within the story, and that is, I feel, better storytelling. It especially when we were talking earlier about Jim Hawkins not necessarily being a super complex character. Um, uh, so yeah, having us kind of having Hawkins be kind of the audience members' uh, perspective, like a Joseph Campbell hero's journey, yada yada yada. Um, how we end up putting ourselves in the main character's shoes, and how a less defined character will be filled out typically by a reader or an audience member, by putting their own life and their own perspective in that main character's shoes. Um, uh, so that makes it a more effective device to deceive us, the audience, at the same time that we're deceiving the character. Uh, but yeah, I think you can kind of see my what I was talking about in my preamble to Treasure Island, in that yeah, Hawkins isn't necessarily a very interesting character, and if you're adapting Treasure Island as even in the '60s, if you're adapting Treasure Island, you have to find somebody else to lean on as a character. And I can tell you that the British aristocrats that are Hawkins' confidants, are more boring than Hawkins himself. There are literally just wooden aristocrats that suck, and I hate them. They seem like real cunts. Uh, the pirates are also cunts, but different kind, uh, in that they are ruthless, um, uh, uh, lack any amount of empathy, um, are cruel, and just kind of just straight villains. Like there's not a lot of complexity to most of them either, which does give a little bit of room for acceptance behind hanging so much of it on Silver, as Silver is the most complicated character within the novel. And there's also, I think I didn't mention before, a kind of cultural historical precedent that has been set by hanging so much of the story's weight on Silver's character. I think that does kind of make sense in a way. But as I said earlier, Silver sucks. He's straight up a villain in this book. Is he a complicated one? Yeah, but he's also a dick and deceiving a child. Jim Hawkins, his family owned the Benbow, but they were not a successful tavern. They weren't. They were poor working class people who, and very early into the story, early in the character's life, Jim Hawkins' father passes away. So it's just him and his mother trying to keep up with not just short two hands, but also short a figure that brings them comfort and love and security, safety. And once they're alone, uh, Billy Bones is kind of the only adult male figure for Jim Hawkins to look up to. As he takes residence, he takes up residence in the Admiral Benbow Tavern. Um, uh, yeah, it's I keep losing my train of thought. My brain not good, not much fit in. Um, but that's neither here nor there. All I'm saying is that yeah, it was surprising to me. As I was saying previously, it was surprising how dry of a read it is for a book about pirates. I expected it to be a lot more rough and rompous, chaotic even. Maybe even something more like the way that Baum runs. You know, similar time periods. And Baum does what Stevenson does in explaining different plot points that won't take place until much further down the road, or re-explaining plot points that have already happened previously, but with new context, but in a way that is silly and ridiculous and chaotic and fun as a reader, as an audience. It's non-linear storytelling done well. And honestly, I guess in a way, I kind of expect more of that in a book like Treasure Island that is so well spoken of and thought of. But yeah, I mean, it's not as dry as like Moby Dick, and I guess comparatively to other works of its time that were more literary or whatever, uh, it probably comes off in that context as a little bit more approachable for a mass audience. But uh, but reading it in the present era, it it feels overly eloquent and explanation. Like yeah, it's an interesting thing I thought of while I was reading it. Anyway, there is a lot of material that I didn't cover today that I was going to cover. We're at our last 20 minutes in the program. And so it wouldn't be advisable to start anymore. I could go back and read some of the stuff that I already started reading, like Wizard of Oz, Conan, Iron Heel. But instead, I am going to try and do like a little wrap up conclusion um, of our celebration of Pulp, our celebration of genre fiction. Uh, so I guess let's go grade school. Let's review. You know, what did we learn today? Uh, I feel like I could have done. I should have had a better selection for the reading of Law. You get some of the chaos and nonsense that comes from his work, but that first chapter doesn't encapsulate how truly bizarre his world and the way he writes it is. Um, I think I did a fairly good job explaining exactly how Conan is without. I think that was the right selection. I mean, there's so much that I could have read to you about how beautifully uh, Howard was able to illustrate violence with words and talk about its effects on the human body uh, and give you these big heroic moments. Uh, and I think, yeah, Hand of Nurgle definitely has that distinct feeling of his prose. I think I did a good selection there. The Iron Heel, I think I did a pretty great job because you read too much further than that, you're going to get a lot of like plot point spoilers that I think are probably uh, less appropriate than a regularly adapted like material like Oz, Conan, things like that. Um, but yeah, um, but I think uh, yeah, I think I'm just going to hit that note again that I was hitting earlier that I think is really the takeaway for this episode, which is Pulp is art, and it's beautiful and messy and uh, fierce. There's a ferocity to it, a um, kind of dynamic that brings out an individual's perspective, that brings out a real human emotion within us when we uh, uh, yeah consume it. Uh, that I think has always drawn me to that kind of work. Um, people talk a lot of shit about J.R. His um, uh, long, drawn out descriptions of the world and the terrain and things of that nature. But I never got that when I was younger. I thought that man was writing poetry, like, and not just because he went and took great lengths to let the audience know where we were and what that looked like, the characters, their motivations, their feelings. That for me added to the material. It felt, especially as I was introduced to it, like something mature and something that I had never experienced as a lover of storytelling and stories and books. It wasn't Goosebumps, that's for damn sure. And I love Goosebumps. I still have a copy of at least one Goosebumps book. Um, Not the Haunted Mask. One about the comic book character that comes to life. I really like that one. Anyway, yeah. Uh, Pulp, Goosebumps. We're still there. Still talking about Pulp. Goosebumps. Silly little Pulp books. Are they good? By what standard? What is good? Art is good. Take a fucking break, you weirdos. Um, Weirdos just like me that like to criticize things. Take a break. Enjoy something for once, you loser. I'm talking to me. But yeah. Um, it brings to mind a lot of conversations I've had over the years about what is good on it, what is bad on it, why are we drawing these distinctions? Um, and I will say this to the day I die: nothing about the aesthetics, or in the case of novels or books, the prose. Nothing about that is going to stop me from enjoying it and loving it. typically what's going to deter me, and maybe I'm alone in this, but hopefully I'm not. What's going to deter me is when you tell me who you are. I think one of the great mistakes that we make is assuming that an author is not coming from their own perspective. They're writing from the hypothetical perspective of somebody else. And yeah, often they are writing in a character. But we're not super complicated creatures, human beings. That level of immersion within a character is rare in authorship, I find. And so when an author is telling me how they see the world, and I have a giant problem with that, that's usually when I start losing interest. Um, and this is something that has come from experience. Uh, Imagine, if you will, a world that looks at an author in this way, um, rather than the aesthetics, rather than many other factors that we are more prone to critique within modern media. Imagine if we had read Harry Potter for what it was at the time. I know a lot of people have a lot of dear feelings for these books, and I can sympathize. I like to immerse myself in Conan the Barbarian, and that shit's racist too. But imagine if we read the character named Cho Chang and we're just like, that's racist. Back in 1994, whenever the book started getting released. That's an inappropriate ass fucking name for this character. As well as many of the others, as well as the inherent anti-Semitism that comes along with the characters, the characterization of goblins. God, as well as so many different points in that book that we should have been like, I know who this woman is. She's telling us. Look at Woody Allen is another interesting example. We'd only listen to what Woody Allen was telling us back when he wrote his first movies. Like, imagine if we just took him serious. And we saw a Manhattan murder mystery and you're like, oh, this guy wants to fuck children. We should definitely not let him do anything and, like, rehabilitate this man. Maybe all of the terrible things that happened to any children ever put in Woody Allen's care would not happen. Do I think that Bob Howard went out and chopped people up with a sword? No, dumbass, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there are perspectives and unexamined bias that come out when you're writing 100 or 100 plus pages, less in many cases, about a character, about a story, and those biases are going to be present, regardless whether you intend them to be or not. And I think that is what is my focus at this point when I read it. What is this person saying with their work, intentionally and unintentionally? What is their perspective as a person that is going to come through inevitably if I look at the work from a place that steps outside of a perspective uh, uh, and analyzes the material for what it's saying? And I think that's that I would encourage you all to say, because oftentimes I look at the kind of criticism that media gets now, and it is often entirely based on a tribalist perspective on a fandom. You like DC and fucking X, Y, or Z filmmaker, whatever, did this character or that situation wrong, incorrectly, not according to its original intent. And um, and team sports are not meant for art. Winning and losing is not meant to be a framing that we apply to art. First, second, and third rankings. These kinds of ways of looking at art and critiquing it, I think, are buffoonish at best. It ridiculous, child brain kind of shit. And we have to examine the material for what it is saying. I've said this many times on this program, many others for Nerd Crafty. Yeah, check out all of our podcasts and pod at the YouTube. You can hear me talk about media a lot. I'm not doing it right now because, well, not, you know what I mean. I'll shut up now. Anyway, it's 10 minutes. I'm actually probably just going to end it right here. I just want to thank everyone for coming. Again, buy my comics, not mine, I made them, but mine, I own them. Some of them are signed by people like Jim Lee. Buy my magic cards. I have a bunch of those that I need to get rid of. By my art, I have a bunch of paintings finished, and I can do your D&D character, or draw a portrait of your best friend or your romantic partner. If you want to see, I also am doing uh, gender affirming portraits, where if you are a queer person like myself and you want to see yourself with a different physical aspect that you were not born with, I want to help you see yourself the way that you see yourself, and the way that you'd like others to see you. I am more than I'm overjoyed when I get those kinds of jobs. Please let me do this for you if you aren't already doing it yourself. These things give me a lot of joy. Um, Also, if you think the work that I'm doing here on Live with Lava Sub through Nerdcrafty is valuable to you in any way, please feel free to support us at Patreon or at my Venmo. Both are incredibly appreciated by the staff and myself, obviously. Yeah, that's my pitch. I'm an artist. I don't make any money. I'm looking for work. Also, you can send me just regular ass jobs. If you're in the Hollywood area, I could use it in if you got one, because I need to start getting to work real fast, so that I don't end up homeless. So give me a job, give me the money. I will be your friend. I also do other stuff that you can find on my Twitter. I can't talk about here. That also I want to make money doing someday. So check that out if you're not under 18. You can find me at Lava Submersible on Instagram and on TikTok, although I barely go on TikTok anymore and I haven't posted in several months. I want to, I just don't care, and it's frustrating. I hate that platform. Not like because of a lot of reasons typically people have for it, but it's just too time consuming. Uh, uh, but, but, uh, anyway, hey, you know what you should do? Take care of yourself. No one else is good? Take care of your friends. Take care of your community. Take care of each other. And as the Swole King He-Man and his comrades always say, good journey.